Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 creepiest graves ever discovered across the U.S., we return to the quiet edges of the world, where the hum of the living fades, and only the wind moves through the graves. These are the stories buried in stone and soil, tombs that whisper, monuments that bleed history, and resting places that refuse to rest. Every account you're about to hear is real, taken from those who've stood before these graves and felt the chill of something watching from below. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers wander in, listen, and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what hour of the night it is for you, and if there's a grave or cemetery in your town that truly unsettles you, type its name below. Because when the world sleeps and the soil settles, some things beneath it do not rest. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. I moved to Salem because my uncle said the off-season there was good for a quiet reset. Cheap rent, often on temp work with the Historical Society, good coffee shops when the tourists cleared out. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months to sort my head out after a breakup and then back to Boston. It's strange how sure we are about timelines, like the future ever listens. The gig that kept me in town started in late September. The Unitarian Church off Charter Street was undergoing restoration. The place looked exhausted in a beautiful way. Leaning pews, plaster peeling like winter skin, a bell tower that sighed when the wind pushed it. The basement had a low ceiling and dirt floor and smelled like old rain. We were there to catalog whatever artifacts turned up during structural work. Most days that meant bent nails, buttons, bits of pottery. I liked the routine. Dust mask on, brush and tray in hand, quiet voices. The little thrill when a scrap of history answered back from the dirt. I worked mostly with 2 people. Dr. Owen Keene, our site supervisor, who had an encyclopedic memory for burial laws and a soft spot for bad coffee, and Maya, another temp like me who could make the slowest day feel fast with gossip and weird trivia. The church's custodian, a man named Doyle who always smelled faintly of sawdust and peppermint, drifted in and out to check the sump pump and complain about pigeons. You can probably guess where this is going, because stories that start with old church usually end in a grave. We weren't there to exhume anything, but the contractor's engineer flagged a dip in the foundation and called Keene in to have a look. We cleared a patch of floor by the back wall and found what looked like the corner of a wooden box, rotten, soft to the touch. The wood had the dark, thirsty look of something that wanted to be left alone. Could be a coffin, Keene said, kneeling. 17th century if the wood is local oak. He said it like we were weather reporters looking at an incoming storm. Doyle's face tightened. This isn't a graveyard, he said. No burials under the church. We've got proper plots outside. Keene didn't argue. He peeled his gloves off slowly. They did things differently back then. Sometimes the very poor, sometimes the unfortunate. He looked at the corner again, or someone no one wanted to claim. We mapped the area, documented everything, and over the next 2 days we brushed the soil away until the outline of the box came clear. 6 feet long, 30 inches wide, the lid warped like a dry smile. The air had a stale sweetness to it, like an attic that never opened. We weren't supposed to open anything without permits, but the box had collapsed enough that the interior showed through. Instead of bones, there was just packed soil. In one spot, the lid's underside was visible, and I thought at first some animal had gotten in. The wood there was torn in ragged arcs as if chewed. Rats? I asked. Maya was squinting. Rats don't leave. That, she pointed. In the strip of lid we could see there were unmistakable crescents in the wood. Human teeth leave a pattern. I didn't know that before, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The room felt colder in that instant. No one spoke for a while. The only sound was the sump pump kicking on and off like a slow heartbeat. Keene cleared his throat finally. We'll cover it for now. Get a conservator, proper channels, and what about reburial? Doyle said. His voice had gone soft. We shouldn't, this is a church. We'll do this right, Keene said. It's a person. That evening, after we put the area to bed under muslin and plywood, Maya and I went for pizza 2 blocks over. We sat in a corner booth with our slices cooling in the paper plates, looking like 2 kids who'd seen something they weren't supposed to. People were buried alive back then, Maya said, almost clinically. Sickness, misdiagnosis. There are diaries about it. Bells attached to coffins, watchmen, it happened. I know, I said. I stared at my untouched slice. Knowing and seeing are not the same thing. She watched me. You okay? Yeah. I smiled in that automatic way you do when you're not. It's just, I heard something. In the church? When I brushed around the lid like, this is stupid. I touched my throat, like whispering. But my mask was up, you were on the other side of the room, and Keen was upstairs. Maya leaned back and let out a low whistle. You're not the first. Doyle told me the basement talks when it rains. Pipes. Sure. She bit into her pizza. Pipes that say actual words. I didn't sleep well that night. My apartment faced a quiet street, and usually you heard the occasional late walker, a screen door, the sea when the wind was right. That night I woke around 3 to the specific silence you only hear in old wood buildings, where the house is listening to you. I went to the kitchen for water and caught my own reflection in the dark window. For a second my brain betrayed me and tried to see someone else there, someone behind me. I went back to bed and told myself not to be 12. The next day, Keen brought in a conservator from Boston and a portable recorder to document the site. He set the device on a stool by the coffin, explained the context into the mic, noted the ambient temperature and humidity, and said into it, "We'll begin cleaning at 10:15. "Who's that for?" Doyle asked. He was standing with his arms folded at the top of the stairs. "Posterity," Keen said, "and because I'm superstitious enough to know that if I don't document every step, something will go wrong." Maya nudged me. That means he's scared too. We worked in soft rhythms, trade tools, brush, pause, photograph. The conservator, a calm woman named Ruth with quick hands, mapped the bite marks and said very little. The soil inside the coffin wasn't soil, not exactly. It had a different texture, clumped differently. She said sometimes decomposition does strange things, especially in sealed spaces. I nodded, pretended that explanation smoothed the wrinkle in my brain where fear lived. Around noon, the overhead lights flickered. It was sunny outside. The sump pump made a harsh coughing sound and stopped. Doyle cursed under his breath and went to the corner to kick the housing. He fiddled, swore again, and went upstairs to the breaker. The quiet that followed was full and deep. Between our breaths, you could hear the building. I don't want to oversell what I heard next, because that's how stories break themselves. You turn a creak into a voice, and then everyone stops listening. What I heard was a hiss at first, like air sliding where it shouldn't. Then a soft, dry sound like paper on paper. It had a shape to it. It seemed to come from the coffin itself, from the seam where the warped lid failed to seal. It was steady. Not wet, not animal. Whisper is the word I don't want to use, and it's the only word I have. Maya's eyes met mine over the box. I could tell she heard it too because her hand froze mid-brush. Keen looked up slowly, then at the recorder on the stool like he was waiting for it to speak. "Do you hear that?" Maya said too loudly, like she was trying to anchor us back to regular sound. "No." Keen said it fast and then amended. "Yes. It's air in the duct. It has to be." Ruth's face didn't change, but her hands did. She stopped moving altogether and just listened. After a few seconds, she cleared her throat and said in the gentlest possible voice, "We need airflow. Lift the plywood over the trench." I did. The whisper stopped like we'd hit mute. The 4 of us stared at the coffin until the sump pump startled back to life on its own, and we jumped like kids. We replayed the audio later. It didn't pick up much, our breathing, the faint whine of the pump motor, a soft rustle. The rustle went on longer than I remembered and had a rhythm my brain kept trying to decode. We listened to that part 10 times, then 20. On the 21st pass, Maya swore, pushed back her chair, and said she hated it in a light, joking voice that didn't quite land. That night, I dreamed of a room with no corners. A voice spoke, but I couldn't find the mouth that owned it. In the dream, I put my ear to the floor and realized I was listening to the house beneath the house. Word about the coffin got around the church community, then the neighborhood, and within a week we had a small crowd at the top of the basement stairs most afternoons. Parishioners, a city councilman, 2 teenage girls who took selfies with the sign we'd posted about respectful observation, a man in a Red Sox cap who asked inappropriate questions and laughed at his own jokes. Salem draws people who want to brush the dark without bringing any of it home. I can't say I hadn't been one of them. A woman about 70, hair in a tight gray braid, came quietly down the stairs one day and stood near the wall, out of the way. She didn't look around like the others. She looked at the spot where the lid was worse chewed. "My grandmother told me a story," she said eventually, almost to herself, "about a man who watched the trials and took names. He helped bring them to the gallows. He was good at it, good at sniffing out fear. After it ended, he got sick. Fever, they said. He made a lot of enemies." Keen asked her if she'd be willing to give an oral history. She shook her head. "It's not history if it keeps happening," she said. "It's weather." After she left, Maya slid a glance at me. "Witch hunter," she mouthed. We kept working. The church committee pushed for reburial. The state wanted more documentation. In the meantime, we were a polite standoff around something that felt like it didn't want to be handled. The whispering came and went. It liked days with a sharp change in air pressure. That's how I explained it to myself. It didn't care that I explained it. It kept happening. On a Thursday afternoon, a storm line rolled in off the water, one of those fast bruised skies that make the day seem drunk. At 3, the roofer upstairs dropped something heavy, and dust came down in a golden sheet. At 3:10, the lights died. The emergency exit signs glowed red like they were embarrassed about it. The sump pump quit. In the dark, the whisper rose louder than I'd ever heard it, a dry crowd sound like many mouths moving over the same word. Keen said my name in the sort of measured way you speak to someone in a ditch. "It's fine," he said. "Power will be back in a second." It wasn't, not for 12 minutes. During those 12 minutes, if I told you the whisper became a voice, you'd stop believing me. So I'll tell you that the sound organized itself. It found a rhythm that matched my breathing. It learned my pace. It came faster when I held still, went softer when I moved, as if motion confused it. Maya stood close enough that I could feel the heat of her arm through her jacket. Ruth squeezed her eyes shut. Doyle stood at the top of the stairs and didn't come down. I don't know what broke in me, but something did. I leaned in, close to the seam in the lid, so close that the smell of the wood filled my mouth. "What?" I said, because it felt like a question that needed asking. The sound changed again. Not louder, closer. It skimmed the surface of something in my head that recognized it without knowing why. I didn't hear words, but I felt an answer like a draft under a door. When the lights came back and the sump pump started with a hungry shudder, the relief in the room was so thick I could have touched it. We laughed for no reason, the way you laugh after a near miss on the highway. Keen made a little speech about weather and acoustics and old buildings and how we were all a bit on edge because old bones ask big questions. We nodded like students. That night I put on the recorder Keen had left in the basement and listened to the 12 minutes. If this were a different story, it would be full of obvious voices and names, a spectral script. It wasn't. It was 60% static, 30% the storm worrying at the building, and 10% that dry, papery sound. But I heard something underneath it once the second repetition started. Our brains want patterns so badly. They'll turn clouds into faces. They'll make music out of machine hums. I know this. I still heard the same shape rise and fall, pause, repeat. A phrase in a language I don't speak. I sat there at my kitchen table and let it play until the recorder died. Over the next week, small things went wrong. Word got out about the bite marks and some local blog ran with it. Then a regional news station did a 30-second segment that made us look like treasure hunters. People started leaving trinkets at the basement stairs. A pack of matches, a rosary, a Polaroid of a woman with her eyes closed, a small carved figure that looked older than the church itself. Doyle was furious. He said we were inviting something we didn't understand. Keen asked him not to be dramatic. In private, he told us to work faster. 2 days later, Ruth called in sick and didn't come back. No explanation. The Boston office sent a new conservator, a guy with big shoulders and a practical smile who lasted 3 hours before, telling Keen that the sight made his teeth hurt and he was bowing out. The day of the incident, there's no better word for it, felt normal. It was cool for October. Maya and I were down early before the church opened to finish measurements while the floor was quiet. Keen was upstairs talking to a committee person about money. Doyle was out back smoking. The basement was ours. It felt like the air before a dropped glass. I don't know why I did it. That's the part I keep going back to. We had taken photos and cataloged the bite marks. We had agreed not to disturb the lid beyond what was already open. The trench around the coffin was neat and square. We worked in silence. The whispering had been quiet all morning, like whatever made it was asleep. I picked up my brush and then put it down. I leaned over the box. I put my hand on the lid. The wood was cooler than the air and had a faint give like palm to ribcage. Maya said my name soft, a warning wrapped in a question. I pressed my ear to the lid and heard nothing but my own blood. "It's nothing," I said. That was my last honest thought. When I wedged my fingers under the warped lip of the lid and lifted, it wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp of cold air, no rush of insects. The wood lifted 2 inches and then stuck. I slid it sideways, careful and slow. The gap widened. The smell that came from the box was faint, old wood and earth and a trace of metal. I waited. I told myself I would look and then cover it. I told myself information was always better. Inside, there was no skeleton. No shroud, just soil, but not like any soil I know. It was less like dirt and more like cast, like the negative space of a body made solid. You could see the impression of a shoulder, a curve of ribs, and where the head would be, there was a hollow, a perfect ellipsis of absence that made my eyes water to look at. My stomach folded in on itself. I wanted to say something light, something stupid. Maya didn't speak. She took one step back, then another, as if distance could unsee. The whisper started again right away, as if the thin line of air was a straw and someone on the other end couldn't wait. It wasn't coming from the soil. It came from the hollow at the head. It wasn't loud. It was so soft it might have been imagined if not for the way it made the hair on my arms lift. I don't remember kneeling, but I must have, because my knees hurt later. I leaned in like a fool, like a child. The sound made brief shapes. I blinked and saw something impossible. A movement in the hollow. Not a hand, not a face, but a pressure like glass under rain. The word that crossed my mind was tongue, and I hate that. I hate the way it felt familiar. Maya grabbed my jacket and yanked me back. "Stop," she said, and her voice had that raw quality people get when they cry in the shower. She slammed the lid back in place. The whisper cut off mid-breath. The pump clunked on upstairs and someone laughed in the sanctuary like a punchline landed. We replaced the plywood, covered the trench, and sat with our backs to the wall. We didn't tell Keen exactly what happened. He knew the way adults know when kids lie about breaking a lamp. He didn't say anything. He called the state office again. He made noises about final steps, about closure. The church committee voted that evening to move toward reinterment. With respect, they said. With dignity. We all said the right words back. The night before the planned reburial, I couldn't sleep. The recorder wouldn't hold a charge. The building across the street looked unfamiliar. I did something I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I went back to the church alone at 1 a.m. with a flashlight and a cheap digital camcorder I'd bought for a different life. I told myself I wanted one last look at history before it went back to the dark. The door at the side was the kind that sticks but opens if you know how to lean. I leaned. The basement was alive with the sound of water in pipes, but when I reached the bottom of the stairs, the mechanical sound stepped back like a polite audience. My flashlight found the trench. The plywood was where we left it. My breath made small white ghosts. I put the camcorder on the stool, hit record, and said my name into the air because it felt appropriate. I peeled the plywood away. I didn't open the coffin. I swear I didn't. I sat on the edge of the trench and waited like an idiot for the building to make its music. It did. After maybe 10 minutes, I heard the soft, papery sound again, far away at first, then nearer. It felt like when someone walks into a room behind you and you know they're there without hearing their feet. I said out loud that it was wind. The wind didn't argue. There's a part of me that still wants to tell you it spoke. That would make the end tidy. Instead, something else happened. The air changed. I felt pressure at the base of my skull, the way you feel weather coming. The whisper overlapped itself, found a rhythm that matched mine. For a second, not even a full breath, I felt a mouth lean close to my ear from inside my own head and shape a word. Not a word I know. Something older and smaller. Something you say to change a thing into another thing. The flashlight flickered. The camcorder whined as if the battery was suddenly hungry. And then my name came from the staircase behind me in a voice that didn't belong to a person in the room. I stood so fast I smacked my shin on the trench edge and tasted metal. I pointed the light at the stairs. They were empty. I said stupidly, "Who's there?" And the silence after was so ordinary it embarrassed me. The whisper at the coffin had quieted. I held my breath and heard a half sound like a mouth shaping a letter it couldn't finish. I put the plywood back with shaking hands, grabbed the camcorder, and left. Outside, the town felt normal again. A delivery truck rumbled past, the driver staring at his phone at a red light. 2 teenagers in hoodies walked by laughing at nothing. I wanted to be angry at them for not carrying what I was carrying. I also wanted to be them. The reburial happened the next afternoon. The church was full. The mayor said something about community and rest. Keene spoke briefly about respect for the dead and learning from the past. The committee chair kept it moving. We didn't open the coffin again. We moved the whole thing, soil and box and brittle lid, to a new site in the yard under a maple tree that was already going red. The whispers did not object. The world kept itself in place. After the service, while people were still milling, the woman with the gray braid came up beside me. She looked at the new mound and the temporary marker stuck in it, then at my face. She had kind eyes. "Sometimes you put a lid on a thing and it's enough," she said. "Sometimes it isn't. When it isn't, you listen harder." "I don't want to," I said before I could stop myself. She smiled in a way that wasn't quite humor. "That isn't always up to you. I thought leaving would help, but the quiet didn't let me off. I finished the contract. I moved back to Boston like I said I would. I went back to my old job. My apartment there was newer, the kind of place where the windows seal right and the walls make no sound. At first, the silence felt like health. You can learn to love almost anything that isn't a problem. The problem was I kept waking at 3 and I started listening. I'd lie in the dark and wait for the house beneath the house. It comes less often now. I tell myself it's memory or guilt or some trick of neurons replaying a shape they liked. When it comes, it's never the obvious thing. It isn't a voice in a language I know. It's the soft, dry sound of paper turning in a library under the ocean. It's my own breath making a rhythm it shouldn't know. It's a whisper that doesn't need to be words to be a question. Sometimes when the moon is bright and the night feels like an old room, I think about the man in that box. Not what he did, history keeps that, and not what was done to him. I think about the basic, terrible fact of a human mouth pressed to wood, making any sound it can, hoping someone will put their ear close enough to hear. I think about how easily we answer without meaning to. We lean in, we listen. We say without saying, "I hear you," and sometimes that's enough to open something that should stay shut. There is one last thing, and I can't decide if it matters. The camcorder I took to the church that night won't play back what I recorded. The file is there, time-stamped 2 hours and 3 minutes. When I press play, I get a gray screen and a hum that raises and lowers like breath. If I let it play long enough, the hum finds a rhythm that matches my own, even when I try to trick it. I could send it to a friend who knows tech, ask them to fix the file. I haven't. It feels wrong to make it clearer. Last week, I went back to Salem for a day. I told myself it was for the coffee, to see Maya, to wave at Keene if he happened to be around. The church restoration is beautiful now. Fresh plaster, sealed windows, a bell tower that looks like it remembers what it was built for. There was a wedding rehearsal inside, laughter that bumped off the ceiling like warm water. I walked around to the yard. The maple had gone bright. Leaves laid themselves over the grass in clean red shapes. A small permanent stone was set flush with the earth where the mound had flattened. Dates no one could confirm, a name no one could agree on, a line beneath, "Beloved by God." The wind picked up and turned a handful of leaves over at once. They made a sound like thin paper. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself the weather had moved in. Then the ground under my feet went still, the way a room goes still when everyone decides to listen at the same time. It could have been my imagination. If it was good at its work. I stood there long enough that my coffee went cold in my hand. When I finally walked away, the leaves behind me settled back into their first position, as if they had never moved at all, as if nothing had whispered, as if the lid on the world would hold forever. I would like to believe that. Most days I almost do. I don't post much on here, but a few weeks ago I wrote up a short comment on a local Phoenix thread about urban legends, and a couple people told me to share the full story on our No Sleep. I've put it off because it still feels too close, like saying it out loud makes it spread, but I keep waking up sweating and smelling smoke that isn't there, so maybe typing this will help. If you're from Phoenix, you'll guess where I'm talking about. I'm going to leave names vague or changed. Not because I'm trying to be mysterious, but because some of these people still have to go to work in the morning. This started last summer. Phoenix had one of those stretches where the heat doesn't dip below triple digits even at night. My girlfriend at the time, we were taking a break, which meant we were still texting about everything, had lent me her infrared thermometer, the cheap pistol kind you can buy, online, because the AC in my apartment was making that hollow sound, and I kept pointing the thermometer at vents in arguments. When the maintenance guy finally fixed it, I just kind of kept the thermometer. It became a fidget toy. I'd point it at my coffee, the wall, my own arm, the neighbor's cat when it sat in the sun. People who live here will get this. You start to think in heat. You talk about it like a person in the room. My friend Maya is the one who mentioned the tomb. We met freshman year at ASU, bonded over how both of us like ordinary places with strange edges. The back hallway of a movie theater, the space behind bleachers. She's more skeptical than me, which made it funny that she brought it up at all. We were driving back from South Mountain at dusk, sweaty and quiet from the climb, when she said, "Have you heard about the hot grave?" "Every grave is hot," I said. "Phoenix is an oven." "No," she said, and I could hear the grin starting. "This one is hotter at midnight than at noon. People have checked." She told me about a small marble crypt in an older cemetery not far from downtown. If you look up Phoenix cemeteries, you'll hit the big landscaped ones with palm trees and fountains. But this place is tucked in an industrial part of town, where the neighborhoods get confusing names like Warehouse District and the grass is always the color of straw. According to her roommate's cousin, I know, there's a mausoleum row off to the side. Most are family vaults. One is freestanding, low, like a marble chest with no windows. The story says it belongs to a fire and brimstone preacher who used to scream about hell in a little storefront church. One Sunday he collapsed mid-sermon and never got back up. He was buried fast, for religious reasons, the cousin said, without all the usual church pomp. And after that, people started to say the marble plug on the front glowed faintly after sundown, not bright like a bulb, like the last red in coals you thought were dead. "You're saying it glows," I repeated. "I'm saying people in the neighborhood complain to the groundskeeper that it feels wrong to walk by it at night," she said. And someone on TikTok said when they aimed one of those thermal camera phone cases at it, the screen went white. "Cameras lie," I said. "Heat guns don't." Maya looked at me like she'd been hoping I'd say exactly that. "So let's go check." I told myself I was indulging her. I told myself it was just a late-night errand, something to text my ex about. My ex, Leah, likes scary stuff in a safe box. She never watches horror movies without the lights on and a podcast playing. The idea of us, two idiots with an infrared gun, made the kind of story we used to trade. We picked up our other friend, Chris, because Chris is the exact balance to Maya's skepticism. He believes every weird rumor just enough to make it fun. He also works nights as a driver and knows every back road in the city. When I told him we're going to go point a thermometer at a grave, he said, "Let me grab a flashlight." Like that made any of it make sense. We went after 11. That late-night wind that feels like opening an oven door had kicked up just enough to push plastic bags along the curb. The cemetery gate wasn't locked. I guess that's normal. People visit late and the groundskeeper can't sit there all night. We slipped in the way you walk into a quiet room, automatically respectful, the way we've all been trained by funerals and noon prayers and the weird hush of hospital elevators. If you don't know Phoenix cemeteries, it's surprising how close everything is to the road. You can hear traffic lines and backup beeps and sometimes the roar of a jet coming in low to Sky Harbor. It makes a strange mix, new sound on top of old ground. We kept to the asphalt lanes, our footsteps a soft slap, the flashlight cone tilted down because it felt rude to shine it at names. Maya led us past a row of granite tablets to a narrower path. The mausoleum buildings were off to the left, short, windowless, more like power boxes than houses. The lawns around them were spotty, clipped too close, sprinkler heads like metal mushrooms. A smell of damp earth fought the heat. We didn't talk much. Every few steps I'd click the infrared thermometer at the ground, at the side of a crypt, at a tree trunk, just to hear the little beep. The ground said 101°. The air didn't care. This one, Maya said, it wasn't the biggest or the most impressive. From a distance, it could have been an equipment shed. Up close, it was a chest-length block of marble, white veined with gray, sitting on a squat plinth. The lid was a slab with slightly raised edges like a sarcophagus from a museum. But there were no angels or crosses, no name that I could see in the first second. The only break in the surface was a square plug, flush with the front panel the size of a baking pan, maybe where they sealed it after the coffin went in. I half expected to see candles or graffiti or anything that says teenagers came here. There was nothing. It was so clean it looked new. I clicked the thermometer at the closest corner, 103 degree F, pretty normal for a rock that had been sitting in sun all day. Just for fun, Chris said, and bowed to the crypt with a flourish like a bad magician. Show us your secrets. His joke made me feel weirdly embarrassed, like I'd brought loud friends to a library. I aimed at the square plug and squeezed. 42 degree F. Do it again, Maya said, leaning in like a gull. The way your body wants to see numbers even though numbers aren't the thing. I squeezed again. 139 degree F. I aimed at a spot 3 inches to the left. 180 back to the square, 143 dig. The number flipped up with no hesitation, no stutter. The little screen washed out at the edges and sharpened again like a breath on glass. That can't be right, I said. It's probably reflecting body heat. I aimed it at my own forearm, saw 91 degree F, which felt like a lie. I was dripping, then at the plug again. 141 degree. This was nearly midnight. The ambient temp had slipped to 98, the kind of number that looks kind on paper. The square stayed in the 140s like it had decided and was sticking to it. Maya, who hates anything she can't explain, tried first principles. Maybe the marble retains heat differently at the seams. She took the thermometer and traced the plug's edges like she was cutting it out. Every corner was hot. The heat died as soon as you left the plug and hit marble again. It was like a red square drawn on the face of the crypt, invisible until you asked. The idea threaded through my head without permission. The heat is from inside. Weird, Chris said. He crouched and put his palm on the plug. I slapped his arm. Don't. Why? It's a rock, he said. If it's not actually hot, your gun is broken. If it is actually hot, I'll move my hand. His fingers landed light and then pressed. He didn't flinch. It's warm, he said. Not 140 warm. Like the hood of a car after dinner. We all took turns. His handprint ghosted in sweat for a moment. To my touch, it felt like a windowsill at noon. The air above it felt hotter. That's the best way I can say it. Like when you're standing over a manhole and the underground heat wafts up your pant leg. It wasn't burning. It was constant. Like a dog breathing under a door. Does it glow? Chris asked. That was the story we hadn't said out loud. Let's give it time, Maya said, and it sounded like a dare. We wandered the path for a while to be less obvious, then sat on the low curbing across from the crypt, the way you might stake out a bad intersection. Phoenix nights mess with you. The same palm trees that look hopeful in the day look like something sketched in quickly, black and flat. Every light in the distance is a house you don't know, a person you'll never meet. Sprinklers hissed on somewhere and hit a patch of hard sun-baked dirt so the water made steam that was more like breath than fog. We watched the square. If you waited, you could almost convince yourself you saw a color gathering around it. Not a glow. That sounds like neon. This was darker than that. It was like the way a stove coil turns from black to not black right before it reddens. My eyes kept telling me it wasn't there and then telling me it was. Like a word you say too many times until it turns strange. We weren't alone. Around midnight, a small security cart toured the main drive. It didn't come down our lane. The driver's head turned, but he didn't slow. In the far row, a couple in their 30s stood with a bouquet, heads bowed, not part of any story but their own. A stray cat crossed from shadow to shadow on soft feet and didn't look at us. I was thinking about leaving when the smell hit. I know it now too well, and I'm asking you to trust me. It wasn't cigarette smoke or brush fire or a grill. It was the smell of a church heater kicking on in winter. If you didn't grow up going to church, we can translate. The first burn of dust off old metal. Dry and chalky and a little sweet like orange peels on a radiator. Only we were outside and Phoenix heaters don't kick on in July. Maya smelled it too. Is someone burning? Her voice was too loud. We all looked around like guilty kids. The couple had gone. The cart was a hum somewhere. The sprinklers shut off and the silence after made it worse. I aimed the thermometer again. 148 degree dough. What if there's a wiring thing under it, Chris said, scrambling for an explanation, like a utility box. Or the sun baked it and the air is just cooling slower there because the plug clicked. I swear to you. I don't mean the imagination click you hear when you're very ready to hear a sound. A physical sound, tiny but engineered, like the click when a thermostat gives up and turns. And along with the click came a sound like air hard swallowing. The smell got stronger. The not-quite color around the square deepened by a shade. I stood. I don't really know why. Maybe to prove to some version of myself watching that I wouldn't just sit there. I walked over, doing that half-crouch people do when they approach something you're not supposed to touch. As I got close, I felt it on my shins, heat rolling off the face of the crypt in a gentle sheet. Not a blast, a steady exhale, Maya said. Don't, in the voice you use to a toddler reaching for a socket. But I was already there. I put my hand out. Not on the square. 6 inches away, then 3, then 1. It was like holding your palm over a candle for a long time. The kind of heat you can stand if you set your mind to it and don't flinch. My hand shook anyway. The buzzing I thought was in my ears wasn't. It was faint, like a fluorescent light in a quiet office, a noise that tells you not that something is broken, but that something is on. And then the whispering started. Look, I know how that reads. I know the line where people stop believing and start scrolling. I'm telling you, it was whispering. Not words I understood. Not like the TV through a wall, but the shape of a voice against a throat. The way whispers have that dry, consonant noise. It came from inside the marble like a conch shell holds an ocean, and under it, very far away, a rhythm. I didn't know what it was in the moment. I know now. It was a cadence, like a preacher tapping the pulpit to punctuate. I yanked my hand back and almost fell into the grass. Chris caught my elbow without looking away from the square. Maya stood as if pulled by a string. The whispering didn't get louder. If anything, it settled, like someone inside had seen us and decided we were nothing. That felt worse. Let's go, Maya said, and I turned before she finished. I did not look back until we were on the main path, half a football field of lawn between us and that place. Only then did I do the stupid thing where you convince yourself it was all a weird acoustic trick and aim the thermometer again. It beeped and flashed 150 degrees. I should stop here and say if that were the whole story, I would put it in a comment as a spooky experience, a thing to make your friend say, no way. We went home. We decided not to be the kind of people who came back with a pickaxe. The next day we texted each other articles about thermal mass and urban legends and laughed too hard at nothing. I tried to give the thermometer back to Leah and she told me to keep it, to keep playing detective. We didn't go back, not right away. 3 days later I was at work, and my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. You need to see this. It was a screenshot from a local subreddit. A user had posted a grainy night photo of a cemetery. The post title was just the coordinates, which put it exactly where we'd been. And the photo itself was mostly black with a smudge of paler black that could be a building. In the middle, a small square looked wrong. Not bright, not like a light left on, just wrong. A different idea of black than the rest of the picture. The top comment was, LOL, it's a reflection. And the second was, my grandma is there, don't be weird. But below that, in a thread nobody upvoted, someone had written, my uncle worked there. He said not to touch the plug. I messaged the commenter because I am dumb like that when I want an answer. They didn't reply. But someone else did in my DMs with a new account created that day. You went there, the message said. Not a question. I blocked it, then unblocked it 15 seconds later because fear and curiosity share a nerve. The account sent a second message, did you smell it? I didn't tell anyone about that. I told myself some teen saw us and wanted to freak me out. I let the day move through me. That evening, Chris FaceTimed me from his dark apartment. His face lit by a blue light I recognized. Dude, he said without hello and flipped his camera to the phone case. He'd bought one of those thermal camera add-ons you can snap onto your phone's lightning port. He pointed it at his hand, the screen went pastel where it was warm. He pointed it at his wall, cool purples. He pointed it at the coffee table where the infrared thermometer lay, and it looked like a lukewarm lump. Then he set the camera on his windowsill and pointed it at the street outside. Look, a guy was walking his dog under a sodium streetlight. The dog showed up as a little white fish and the guy as an orange, ordinary man shape. In the lower right corner of the screen, indoors, out of frame, there was a square of white so bright it clipped. Chris moved the phone. The square moved with it. What is that? I said, very calm the way you are when none of the tools in your head fit the screw in your hand. I don't know, he said. I thought my AC unit was working overtime, but it's not in the room. It's on the screen. Maya came over with 2 iced coffees and that look she gets when she's pretending not to be scared. We turned off every appliance in the apartment. We pointed the thermal thing at the empty air, and the square stuck in the same corner of the screen like a dead pixel, except it reacted when you moved your body close. When I held my hand up between the camera and the corner, the white square went fuzzy around the edges like heat does when it meets wind. That's when I realized I was standing exactly where I had stood in front of the tomb, hand almost touching the plug. My body remembered the position before my brain did. "This feels like contamination," Maya said, "like we tracked it in on our shoes." We decided to go back, the way you decide to clean up a spill before it stains. We told ourselves we'd do it rationally. Go during the day, talk to someone who worked there, ask if utilities ran under that plot, take a picture that looked like nothing, go for tacos afterwards. We went on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning when the city feels like a hairdryer left on a counter. The gate was open with a faded sign that said, "Sunset Closure," in a font no one had used in 20 years. A groundskeeper in a neon vest was hosing dust off a stone statue. We waved like we belonged and went straight to the office. The woman behind the glass had the kind of calm face people get when they deal with death paperwork all the time. Helpful, tired, unstartled. Maya did the talking. She asked if some of the vaults were wired for lighting or cooling. The woman smiled like we were charming tourists and said no. The family mausoleums were sealed. The cemetery didn't provide services beyond security and sprinklers. "What about that small marble crypt on the east side?" Maya asked. "White, kind of boxy? No name on the front?" The woman looked at her screen and frowned a little. "We have several like that." "Which plot?" Maya glanced at me. "We could show you." She didn't give the coordinates, which made me like her more in that second than I had in months. The woman stepped out from behind the glass and checked the lock on the office door with the automatic hand of someone who doesn't want to get in trouble, and walked with us into the sun. Up close, she had a small tattoo on her wrist of a date. It made me stop staring at people's wrists for a while. We took her the way we'd taken each other that night, slower now because seeing something in the day makes it less about you. We stopped 10 feet from the crypt. It looked even cleaner in full sun. In daylight, you could see a faint line across the plug where the sealant had been smoothed. I half expected to see a fresh bouquet leaning against it or crusted wax on the plinth. There was only a tidy rectangle of clipped grass that looked like it had been ironed. "That one?" the woman said, not eager. "Yeah," Maya said. The woman didn't approach it. She looked at the bare face for a beat and then at the ground, like she could read it there. "We had a pastor in that one," she said. "Decades ago, he had special instructions. I wasn't here then. My boss was. He's retired. We don't open sealed tombs unless a court order, and we don't talk about who's where unless you're family." "I get it," Maya said. "We were just curious because—" She stopped. Probably because the plug glows red would sound stupid with birds singing and a gardener mowing 4 rows over. The woman surprised me by finishing her sentence for her. "Because kids say it's hot." She said it like she was reading off a card. Then she added, without looking at us, "Don't touch the plug." And then, "I'm not saying that officially. I'm saying I would not do that if I were you." "Why?" I asked. She turned her face toward the building with the soda machine, the way people do when they don't want to look at the thing they're talking about. "You get home and it's like you brought the smell with you. We've had complaints. Nothing to write down. Not the kind of complaint you can put in a computer." She looked back at us. "Please don't be those kids," she said. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a prayer. We thanked her and pretended we were going to leave, but of course we didn't. We waited until she was back at her desk, then circled around the far side of the mausoleums, hiding like tourists do when they think they're not being watched. The dumb instinct to see it again was stronger in me than I like to admit now. It felt like scratching a soft itch will turn into a scab. The sun was brutal. Heat pooled on the white stone until the little lizards were doing that crisscross dance to keep their feet from sticking. It made everything mirage wavy. We weren't going to touch it, I swear to you. I just wanted to aim the thermometer, get a normal daytime reading and go. I lifted the gun. 24 degree F, that made sense. I aimed at the plug. 141 F. I felt like someone had dumped a cup of cold water between my shoulder blades. Sweat crawled. "It's noon," I said, as if time should make rules. Maya said, "Okay." In a very neutral voice. Chris wasn't talking. He had his phone out with the thermal camera on, pointed at the crypt like a reporter. On the screen, the square was white, sharp corners like a sticker. The rest of the marble was golden. The grass was a wash of normal. "Okay," Maya said again. "That's enough," we went. We weren't brave. We weren't stupid enough to be brave. But fear makes you clumsy. We took the wrong way out and ended up behind the maintenance shed, where the boundary wall dips low and the neighbor's cinder block fence line butts up to it. There was shade there, a blessing in Phoenix, so we stopped for a minute to breathe. That's where we met the man. He was sitting on a plastic milk crate by a stack of pallets, wearing a uniform shirt with the cemetery logo and a name patch I won't repeat. He had a hand towel over his shoulder and a face the desert makes on people who work outside. Lined, hard, sun permanent. He looked at us and we did the sheepish thing you do when you've been somewhere you shouldn't. He didn't scold us. He said, "You went to see the hot box." His voice wasn't accusing. It was weary, like he'd said the phrase too many times. "We were just curious," Maya said, who was better at talking than me. "Curiosity is good," the man said. "Curiosity tells you to step back from a thing that wants you up close." He looked at me specifically, like he could spot the idiot in any crowd. "You touched it." I was ready to lie. He saved me by waving a hand. "Don't tell me. I don't need to know. I can smell it on people when they do. They come back a week later and ask for a blessing. We don't do that. We mow. What is it?" Chris said, which is the only question any of us ever had. The man shrugged in a way that wasn't a shrug. "They brought him in with too many people. The preacher. Some die and they take up little space. He died and the room got smaller. They put him in there because the family wanted tight. They say he liked tight." The man wiped his forehead with the towel. He used to say the door to heaven was narrow. He liked the idea of narrow things. He didn't look at us when he said it. He looked at the wall beyond us like if he met our eyes we might ask him to prove it. "You should go home," he said. "Open your windows. Pack ice in a bowl and put it on your table. If the smell comes with you, don't invite it to sit." We left. I don't know what we looked like, walking past the office with our heads down as if we'd been shamed by a parent. I know the woman behind the glass watched us go with a look that was half kids and half something else. Here's where the story gets worse because it gets smaller. Big scary things you can point at and say, "There." Small scary things sit in your kitchen. That night, my apartment's air felt heavy. Not hot exactly. Close. I put a metal mixing bowl of ice on my coffee table like I'd been told, which felt ridiculous until I smelled it. The heater smell. The church-warm dust-burn smell at midnight in Phoenix. It wasn't constant. It pulsed like a neighbor walking into a room and out again. I aimed the thermometer at the bowl and saw 36 graus and felt like a man with a charm in his pocket. I texted Maya and Chris. Both of them were up. Both of them wrote, "I smell it too." The next day, the smell was gone. The day after that, it came back. It started to attach itself to certain things. My oven when it was off. The wall above my bed where the sun hits at 2 p.m. The phone in my hand when I scrolled too long on the thermal camera footage. The square was still stuck in the corner of the app like a watermark, white hot regardless of where I pointed it. I uninstalled the app. I threw the snap-on in a drawer. The square came back the next time I opened my camera to take a picture of a plant. Not white now, not that blatant. A kind of dark where there should be light. I thought it was a smudge on the lens until I wiped the lens and it moved away from my hand and then drifted back like a slow fish. Leah came over that weekend because she is kind and because we were both pretending we were still just taking a break, like breaks or something you can schedule. I told myself I wasn't going to tell her. Within an hour I had told her. She listened with her arms folded and her mouth caved in with doubt. Then she smelled it mid-sentence, her face changed. "Do you have a gas leak?" she asked. I showed her the bowl of ice, the way it steamed slightly when you leaned over it. "That's condensation," she said, very rational, and then the whispering started. It didn't sound like it had at the cemetery. There it had been muffled by stone far away. Here it sounded like someone in the hallway outside the front door, speaking into the grain of wood. Not words, just the motion of them. Leah's shoulders came up around her ears. She looked at the door, then at me. "Tell me you have a neighbor with a weird TV." I got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty as always at 1 a.m. when nobody wants to leave their cool cave. I put my ear to the door the way you do when you're a kid and you want to hear your parents move. Nothing. When I stepped back into the living room, the whispering was right above the coffee table. The bowl of ice was sweating hard. The smell was not of gas or dust anymore. It was a sweet ash smell like the orange peel thing but denser, like someone had opened an old heater 3 times. Leah and I did not sleep. She left at dawn because she had an early shift and the argument we didn't have had already happened in the air between us. She texted me 2 hours later. I can still smell it. Did you shower? Then, I need to not think about this at work. Please don't text me about it. That's how you know when something has started to win, when it makes people change the way they talk. We tried not to feed it. We didn't go back to the cemetery. We did all the rational things that make your rational friends nod. I ran my oven to burn off anything. I changed my AC filters. I put a bowl of vinegar on the counter like the internet told me to do when you cook fish. The square still drifted on the edge of my photos like a burnt corner. If I held my hand up to the camera and moved it toward the square, my palm tingled the way it had above the plug. 3 nights later, Chris called me, not FaceTime, just voice, and said, "Come over," in a voice you don't argue with. I drove over in a heat haze I barely remember. His apartment was cooler than mine, darker, always smells like coffee. That night it smelled like a church basement. He'd taken his smoke detector down because it kept chirping with no smoke. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the couch, eyes on the TV. He wasn't watching anything. The TV was off. In the dark screen reflected, I could see the coffee table in front of us in the white square, sharp as geometry. "It's in the reflection," he said. "Not on the TV, on the room." We sat like middle school kids at a sleepover, arms around our knees, and watched the square. It didn't do anything dramatic. That's part of why I believe it. It just was. A bright, wrong idea in the air. The whispering came like a draft under a door, and with it a rhythm. And with that rhythm, the memory slid into place so clean it made my stomach drop. The tap-tap of knuckles on wood. A pulpit, not a drum, a preacher's metronome. Something happened then that I have made myself write down exactly because if I don't, my brain wants to make it bigger or smaller. There was a click, like there had been at the tomb. The smell deepened like someone set a knob from 2 to 3. Chris's dog, the nice old beagle mix he adopted last year, stood up on the couch like she'd been shoved and climbed into his lap, which she hadn't done since she was new. She didn't whine. She just pressed herself so hard into him that her back legs trembled. In the reflection, the square edged closer to the coffee table and stopped like it had found a line it didn't cross. "Okay," I said. "Okay." The way people say okay when they want to disagree with the ocean. We left the dog with him and went to Maya's. We didn't call first. She opened the door with a look that was angry until she saw our faces. Then she stepped back and let us in the way you let a storm in because it's already here. Maya's apartment always smells like eucalyptus and marker pens. That night it smelled like the inside of a space heater. You know the smell I mean by now because it's in the room where you're reading this. She had put bowls of ice in 3 rooms. They were all half melted, beads of water threaded down like strings of glass. We sat on the floor again because chairs felt like lies. Maya put her hand flat on the floor and said, "Feel this," and we all did, like people touching a pregnant belly. The floor was warm in a patch the size of a square baking pan. You could move your hand outside it and feel normal. Inside it was warmer, not hot, just unnaturally steady. There were no pipes there. She had a slab foundation and no radiant heating. Phoenix homes don't. I'm a coward in the ways that matter, but that night I did the one brave thing I've done in this. I texted the woman at the cemetery office. We had the number because it was on the website. I didn't think she'd answer. She did 15 minutes later, a call that whined a little with Bluetooth. "You're the kids," she said, not unkindly. "It's late." "I'm sorry," I said. My voice was a mess. It came home. It sounds crazy, I know, but it came home. She was quiet long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then, "I believe you." The relief in me made my eyes sting. "I can't tell you what to do," she said. "We aren't that sort of place. But if you want my advice, don't talk to it like a person. People try to argue. They try to preach back. It likes that. It's food. What do we do instead?" Maya asked, because Maya is always the one to ask the question that isn't just screaming. "Open all your doors," the woman said. "If you have a box fan, point it out. Lights on, don't watch it. Don't hang around it. Move through your house like you've forgotten why you came into rooms. Act bored. It hates bored," she paused. "We put bowls of water by the plug sometimes. Cold ones. It makes the smell stay there. Don't do that inside. You don't want to give it a chair. You know how sometimes someone says something so specifically strange that you know they aren't making it up? That's what that chair line did to me. We did what she said. We opened doors like we were trying to air out burnt popcorn. We pointed fans at the outside like we were telling the apartment a secret. We turned on music, not hymns, not words, just dumb pop songs with no structure. We talked about TV shows we weren't watching. We said, "I'm going to get a glass of water," out loud like we were in a play. The whispering drifted and thinned and moved to the doorway, and then, around dawn, was gone as if the room had changed its mind about having corners. Here's how this ends. Because stories like this don't end properly, they just get tired. We didn't go back. That needs to be clear. If you're reading this thinking, "I would go back," good for you. I hope you never have the chance to test that. We blocked the coordinates on our phones. We blocked the thermal camera people online. We did not say the preacher's name. Not that we knew it. That feels important. We did not talk about what he preached because somewhere in me it felt like advertising. We planted ourselves in ordinary errands. We walked at dusk on purpose to sweat on purpose and smell dust on purpose, so that when we smelled it in our houses, we could pretend it was us. It still comes. Less than at first, more on some weeks. It likes the hours after midnight and before 3. It likes Sundays, which is either coincidence or the part of my brain that keeps the ghost calendar. The square shows up less in my photos now, more in mirrors on cloudy mornings. I don't wear a watch, but the soft inside of my wrist will sometimes feel warm as if I've had one on and taken it off. When I pass the office park with the little non-denominational church on McDowell, I don't look, but I hear in my head the tap-tap of wood underhand. 2 last things. Because they're small and I think the small parts matter. 1. A month after all this, I saw the groundskeeper again at the grocery store. He was buying ice and bread and the kind of bologna that makes sandwiches taste like 1996. I almost didn't say anything, but I did. I thanked him. He didn't ask for my name. He just told me, "Don't tell it stories, mijo. It will stand in the door and listen." I wanted to ask what he meant. He had turned away already like the table was wobbling, and he was the only one who knew where the napkin was. 2. There's a little strip of lawn off the main drive of that cemetery where a patch of grass never quite greens. You can see it from the road if you're stopped at the light. It's not where the crypt is. It's not even near it. But if you point a cheap thermometer out your car window at noon, the beep will come easy and the number will be wrong. And you'll tell yourself it's because the sun hits it funny. The other day, stuck at that light, I did it to prove to myself I'm still a person who does normal things. The thermometer read 98 degrees and 108-degree heat, cold in the middle of a Phoenix July. I rolled up my window and laughed alone in my car like a man with too much coffee. Then I smelled the heater-warm church dust smell threading under my AC and decided not to tell anyone until now. If you go looking, and you will, some of you will, don't touch the plug. If you already did, don't talk to it. Don't knock back when you hear it knock. Put bowls of ice on your table and pretend you don't see the way they sweat. Tell your friends about bad TV. Turn music on with no words and let it be boring. Let the night be night. Let it not have a chair. And if you smell it anyway, if you wake up sweating with your wrists warm and the faintest red idea in the black places of your room, remember this. Some doors are narrow because they were built that way. Some are narrow because there's a shoulder on the other side, pressing them shut only as a hint of a favor. I don't know which kind we're living next to. I don't think I want to find out. Cemeteries float here, and so do the dead. In St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, one grave has never stayed still. Each summer storm seems to move it a few feet overnight. No one dares rebury it now. The nameplate vanished decades ago, replaced by a single word scratched in the marble. Returned. I'm not from New Orleans. I came down from Baton Rouge last June to help a nonprofit scan and map old cemeteries after the city had a couple bad floods. The job was mostly dull in the way that old paper is dull. Clipboard work, measuring, photographing, making sure the GPS points on our tablets lined up with what our eyes were seeing. I had a small team. Me, my friend Maya, a grad student with steady hands and a dry sense of humor, and Andre, ex-contractor, stronger than both of us, soft voice that made you lean in to hear him. We reported to a local historian, a woman named Miss Robichaud, who had probably forgotten more about these tombs than I'll ever know. If you've never been to St. Louis number 1, it's like a tiny city of stone 1 block over from the living one. The tombs stand shoulder to shoulder, shotgun style, with narrow alleys that turn into canals when it rains. On our first morning, a tour group drifted past while we wrestled the tripod into place. The guide talking about Maria Laveau and the little X's people draw on her tomb. I didn't know if that was respectful or not. I kept my head down and marked a crosshair on my clipboard. The grave that moved wasn't on our original checklist. I noticed it because the path we were using ended where it hadn't ended the day before. I thought I'd misread the map. You get turned around in there. Most of the tombs are white or gray and patched with different eras of concrete. Some have rusted gates with names. Some are anonymous, sunk, or broken. But this one was simple and strange. It was a low rectangular vault, not much to look at, with a slab top almost flush to the edge. No flowers, no beads, no paint. Just the chalky word "returned" scraped into the marble near the front right corner. The letters double-stroked like someone carved the same word again when it faded. "Was this on your list?" I asked Maya. She peered at her tablet. "What's the number?" No number. No name. Just this. I took a photo anyway. Andre squinted at the slab. "Who writes that? Return to who?" "Return to where?" Maya said. "It's sinking." It did look like it was sinking a little. The left back corner had a hairline crack and a tilt, like a table with one short leg. I measured it because that's what we were there to do. I wrote down the angle and the GPS point, then made a note. Unmarked vault. Inscription: returned. It felt a little like writing my name on a fogged mirror. Stupid, temporary, pointless. The sun was already climbing and the air felt like wet cloth. A couple days later, the vault wasn't where we left it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like the ground had spat it out and dragged it across the walkway with deep trenches behind it. It had shifted maybe 2 feet to the right, closer to a path we hadn't taken before. I only noticed because the angle of our photos didn't match. You line things up after a while by habit, corner to corner, shadow to shadow. My picture from Monday had a little crucifix peeking over the right corner. The new picture didn't. I walked out the steps and tried to tell myself I was wrong. It's easy to be wrong about distance in a place built like a maze. "Did you move the marker?" I asked Andre. He had his arms crossed and the tape measure hanging from his fist like a tail. "Nope." "Maybe you bookmarked the wrong point," Maya said, but her voice was careful. I measured again. I measured 3 times. I took pictures from the same angles, kneeled on the same gum-sticky tiles, circled the thing like it was a crime scene. The word "returned" looked newer. That was the part that got under my nails. It was still shallow and scratchy, but the dust from the fresh scrape was caught in the groove. A tour guide glanced over at us like we were performing for the group, so I forced a shrug. I didn't want to be the out-of-towner who made a fuss. We logged the new coordinates, we moved on. 2 nights later, a storm rolled through, the kind that wakes up old damage. The thunder in New Orleans doesn't sound like other thunder. It sounds like the river coming inside for a look around. I went back the next morning with a mop in my trunk because I've learned that if you bring a mop, you're less likely to need it. We sloshed down the narrow aisles with our pant legs rolled up and our socks quick to surrender. The vault had moved again, bigger this time. It sat kitty corner to where it had been Tuesday. The crack on the left back corner now ran across the top like a fishing line. The ground around it looked undisturbed. No scrape marks, no new mud piled up on the edges. It was as if we had misremembered where it was. That's what I told myself. Memory is not a photograph. I told myself a lot of things, like how humidity bends a person's mind and how city landmarks all look the same if you're tired enough. We took new photos. We took too many photos. Maya went quiet, which meant she was trying to figure out who to tell. Andre stood with his hand on the rim of the vault like he was feeling for a heartbeat through the stone, and then he pulled his hand away and rubbed it on his jeans. "What?" I said. "Cold," he said. "Colder than it should be. Colder than the shade." He wasn't wrong. When I pressed my palm to the slab, it felt like the side of a fridge. That can happen with stone, I guess. It can be cold to the touch even in the heat. but something about the way it drank the warmth from my skin made me pull back quick. Miss Robichaud didn't laugh at us, which almost felt worse. She frowned and said, "There are reasons a vault can float. Hydrostatic pressure is a mean thing. But this one?" She tapped my photo with the returned angled toward the camera. "This one's a troublemaker. I know it." "Why hasn't anyone re-anchored it?" Maya asked. "You don't just scold a vault like it's a drunk man on Bourbon Street," she said. "You need permission and the family and money and a dry week and men who won't ruin it. Sometimes you leave the sleeping dog in the sun and say a prayer." "Do you know whose it is?" Andre asked. "I know who it might be," she said, and looked toward the doors of the office like someone might walk in and answer for her. But bodies get moved and names get lost. She told us a half-story about a caretaker in the 80s, a man named Doucet, who started the habit of etching "returned" on wayward lids as a joke, like how supermarkets write "back in stock" on hand-lettered signs. People said he went mean and then went missing, but New Orleans is hard on men who drink and sleep in humidity, and missing might have meant left or got buried under a different name. There are stories you accept because they feel correct, even if they don't narrow anything down. We logged the vault as mobile, which made us feel smart for half a second, and then we kept working. The only thing that changed was how often we looked over our shoulders. It kept happening, moving after storms, but sometimes on perfectly clear nights. No tracks, no drag scars, no roofing nails left in a trail behind it like breadcrumbs. Once it moved in the middle of a morning. Andre had gone back to the truck for batteries and Maya had walked to the office to chase a signature, and I was alone, with the sun and a cicada and the click of my own pen. I took a photo, capped the lens, took a sip of hot water, uncapped the lens, and the corner of the vault was just closer to my boot, like a step forward in a conversation. I stood there and looked straight at the thing and said, "Okay." I don't know why. Maybe respect? Maybe because it felt like somebody had said my name from behind a door and was waiting for me to admit I heard them. It wasn't the only strange piece. Around the time the vault started moving, I stopped being able to put my keys down without losing them. The first time it was the office keys. I left them on the corner of the desk by the box fan, and then tore the place apart for 20 minutes while the fan chopped the humid air into quarters. Found them on the bookcase behind a stack of defunct city maps that no one had touched in a month. A week later, I lost the truck keys, found them in my left boot under a sock. I joked about it. Everyone laughed with that thin laugh that asks you to stop. Tourists left pennies on top of the returned vault, even when there were no other offerings anywhere nearby. I didn't see them leave the coins. I just started noticing copper moons on the slab at different times of day, and then counting them without wanting to. 2, then 1, then 3. Never more than 3. A widow who came every Sunday to put flowers on her husband's tomb found her bouquet retied with a strip of wet cloth. "It's not mine," she told us when she caught us in the aisle. She held it with one finger out like a cheap piece of ribbon you don't want to touch. She looked frightened but tried to laugh it off. "Who's playing at my expense?" Maya wanted to set a camera overnight. She said we were wasting our time groping for patterns like kids with a Ouija board. She was right. We got permission in a ring-around way that made Miss Robichaud uneasy. And on a Thursday, we zipped a trail cam to the wrought iron foot of a nearby tomb and aimed it at the returned vault. The footage was boring, until it wasn't. If you've watched Budget, Night Vision on a cheap camera, you know how the world turns inside out in the beam. The stone is ghost white, the sky is black, the insects are meteors. For most of the night, it was just that. Grainy motion and the occasional rat. Around 4 in the morning, the rain started, a polite sprinkle that turned rude. The camera lens beat it up. The timestamp walked from 4WAG to 404 to 409. Then the frame jumped. Just a single glitch, like someone had swiped a finger across the lens and the night had smeared. In the next frame, the vault sat 3 feet to the left. Between frames, no men in slickers, no forklift whispering in on cat feet, just a glitch and a new arrangement of stone. Andre rewound it 3 times. "Nah," he said, then in a softer voice, "Nah." He looked like a kid who had been convinced the magician was fake and just saw the rabbit. We brought it to Miss Robichaud, and she pushed the laptop back toward me with 2 fingers. "You show that to the Archdiocese office and they'll laugh you out of your shoes," she said. "You show that to the papers and people will climb the walls in there for a selfie at midnight." Then something worse will happen. What's worse than a moving grave? I asked. Attention, she said, so we kept it to ourselves. That happens more than you think. People keep their strangest truths small so they can keep living next to them. I started to dream about the cemetery like it was my house. Not even nightmares, just practical dreams where I had to walk down those halls of stone to get to the kitchen, where I had to pass the returned vault to get to the front door, and I would wake up thinking I had forgotten my bag and feel my hand closing around the strap that was really my bedsheet. My apartment was a second floor, shotgun in mid-city with a window unit that groaned like a dog with hip pain. The lives of my neighbors filtered through the walls. A trombone student, a woman who liked late-night church radio, a man who cooked onions after midnight. Normal, busy, alive. One Friday around 1 in the morning, I heard a scraping sound that wasn't any of those lives. Not nails, not furniture, something dense being tugged. A slow, dry sound. I sat up because the sound made me sit up. The scraping paused. I listened until the listening became a pressure in my head. Then I got up and went to the kitchen to tell myself I needed water anyway. At the sink, I turned on the tap and flinched at my own face in the window. One of the dumbest reflexes in the human toolkit is how we think reflections are people. The faucet coughed and steadied. The scraping started again, closer this time, through the kitchen wall behind the sink, then not through it exactly, but from that direction. I killed the tap and leaned toward the wall with my head cocked like a dog. The sound stopped. People always tell themselves stories to stop a feeling. Mine was, someone's dragging a chest of drawers in the unit next door at 1 in the morning because people are inconsiderate. Because the world is stupid and normal. I said out loud, it's nothing. The word hung in the air like a fly that didn't belong in the room. I poured my glass down the drain, decided I didn't need the water after all, and went back to bed because a different dumb reflex is thinking blankets are shields. The next morning, when I walked into St. Louis No. 1, the returned vault sat at the entrance where it had never sat before, pointed toward the gate as if somebody had pushed it into the path and set it facing the street. My heart hit my ribs so hard I thought I'd been surprised by a person. Maya whispered a hard no, and the widow who brought flowers took a single step backward like she'd found a snake where her foot was about to go. The tour guides had to detour. People took photos because nothing stops people from taking photos. You can hear a parade and walk the other way, or you can hear a scream and walk toward it with your phone. Both are equal forces in that city. We took measurements because that's what we knew how to do. I tried to keep my tape from shaking. Maybe it's somebody messing with us, Andre said when we found some scuffs on a corner. Maybe we're the show. He wanted it to be a prank so badly his voice cracked. Who would move 1,000 pounds of stone for a joke? Maya asked. More than 1,000, I said, because the part of my brain that remembered weights needed something to do. We decided to sit with it. No cameras. The last footage made all of us feel hunted by our own screen. Just the three of us in the vault and the heat and the smell of algae. It was a bad plan. Sometimes you know it's a bad plan and do it anyway, because a person wants to be present when their life tips from explainable to not. We took shifts. Day slid into evening. The dragonflies changed guard with the mosquitoes. Andre fell asleep sitting up and looked like a carved saint. The cemetery took on the sound it gets at night. A round, empty quiet with a few notes of distant laughter and TV warmth from the houses on Basin Street. Maya scrolled her phone and then put it away and said, I keep thinking this is going to be nothing until it's everything. The air tightened around 10 p.m. the way it does before a pop-up storm. My hair stood up, far away, thunder like someone shuffling furniture in a different apartment. We watched the vault like it was a dog near the edge of a road. It didn't move. Not for an hour, not for two. Then, with no ceremony, it wasn't where it had been. One blink, one eye rub, one small gasp from Maya, and the returned vault was now angled toward us, closer by maybe a foot. It had not moved. It had been somewhere else, and then it was nearer. That was the sensation. I could tell you I felt that in my joints. I could tell you the grass near my feet darkened with dew at the same moment. I could tell you anything, and it would be true because the truth is that subtle. Andre stood slowly like the air had thickened. Stop, he said, which is what you say to a dog or a friend who's about to cross a line. He put his hand out in a little traffic cop motion. I had the stupid urge to laugh because it was so absurd and human and right, and then I choked on the laugh because the vault was close enough that I could reach it with my boot. Rain started without meaning to. Fat drops like warm fingertips. The word returned was beaded with water and looked freshly carved again. The dust flushed clean. I set my palm on the marble. It was cold. Not stone cold, freezer cold, a cold that lives under your fingernails. "Don't," Maya said quietly. "What do you want?" I asked the slab of stone like it could answer. Something knocked under our feet. Not a scrape, a knock. The kind you make when you're in a room with a closed door and you're polite enough to ask before you open it. 3 knocks, not loud. I didn't jump. My nerves did. The rain steadied. I looked around like the sound could be explained by a person crouched behind something with a stick. No one. The cemetery is honest that way. "We should go," Maya said. I could hear her moving the word through her teeth, trying to make it casual. Andre didn't move. He looked past me. "There were 2 pennies," he said, "and now there's 1. He said it in a voice I'd never heard from him before, a kid's voice. He stepped back like an animal about to bolt. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember the feeling of the gate being farther away than it had any right to be. Walking paths in that place at night is like trying to cross a mall with the escalators turned off. The angles elongate. The gate stayed the size of a postcard. Another knock. Closer under the soles of my shoes like a bad heartbeat. Rain turned hard and wind pushed at our shoulders, which helped because it meant we had a reason to move fast besides fear. At the gate, the guard from day shift, old, kind man named Felix, who always had a newspaper folded into thirds, stood under the arch and looked past us with a fixed face. "You lock it?" Andre panted. Felix nodded, then took out his ring and rattled it and fumbled for the right key because keys misbehave when your hands shake. He glared past us like a coach daring a player to test him. "You got 10 seconds to be out," he said. But he was talking to the graveyard, not to us. We went home early the next day. I had a headache that felt like a hat. I woke up to that scraping sound again. Not next door this time, but closer. Inside close. I was up before my brain knew it, down the hall and into the kitchen. And then I put my hand on the doorframe to stop myself. The scraping wasn't in the kitchen. It was in the wall behind the sink where the pipes ran and the plaster flaked. It had paused like it was listening. I don't know how I could tell that the sound was listening, but that's the word I've come to months later. Listening has a texture. "Don't," I said, and it felt insane, but the word came out anyway. I didn't move for a long time. The scraping started up again, brisk this time, and then stopped. And then something thumped just once under my floor, enough to shake the glasses in the cabinet like a tiny earthquake. The next morning, my front steps were wet with a line of water that ran from the sidewalk to my door and stopped crisply, like the tide had changed its mind. In the middle of that wet ribbon sat a single dry penny. It wasn't old. It wasn't new. It was just a coin, and I stared at it like it was a rattlesnake I'd have to step over. I picked it up. It was warm. I didn't want to keep it, and I didn't want to throw it away. I stuck it in my pocket. It's still there, in a dish with paper clips and the tab off a can of iced tea. I told Maya. She listened with her mouth pinched, then said, "There could be a leak." Like she owed the world an explanation in exchange for the world not being worse. Andre didn't come in that day. He texted me a picture of his hallway floor with a chalky ring on it, like a heavy circle had rested there for a minute and then gone. He said, "Tell it to knock somewhere else." I told him not to talk about it like that, like we owed it courtesy, and then I didn't text him back for an hour because I didn't want to think about what it was. You've probably guessed where this is going. I'm sorry if it moves too slowly. That's how it happened. The returned vault kept showing up near the gate in the mornings and then back by the middle of the cemetery by afternoon, like it was pacing. We stopped measuring because the numbers made us feel small and stupid. We started pretending we didn't notice. The tourists noticed. The widows noticed. The city noticed in that way where officialdom shrugs and says, "Old place, old problems," and you can almost hear the paperwork breathing a sigh of relief. Felix retired suddenly. No party. When I asked Miss Robichaud, she looked away and said he wasn't feeling himself and went to stay with his daughter in Slidell. He left at night, she said, slipping the words out like they might break if she dropped them. He didn't like to do that. When the storm came in late August, the one the meteorologists said wouldn't be much, and then rolled their eyes at the sky when it decided to be more, Maya talked me into one more night sitting in the cemetery. Not to catch anything, she said. Just to prove there's nothing to catch. She said it with a smile too bright for the room. I said yes because saying yes felt braver than saying no. We planned better this time, ponchos, thermoses, flashlights. We told no one. The rain began at 9 and stuck. The cemetery turned into a shallow pool where the water couldn't decide if it wanted to be still or moving. We huddled under a stone angel's broad wing and watched the returned vault across the aisle. The word glistened on its face. Andre didn't come. He texted that his mom needed him and he'd check in later, and then he didn't answer when we told him we were fine. The water rose and found my shoes. I thought about the bodies in this city that floated after Katrina, how people who lived here learned to weigh their dead to keep them from rising when the world tilted. I thought about the word returned and how stupid it sounded until you had to wrap your mouth around it at 4 in the morning. The knock came late. Not 3 this time, 1, then silence, then another farther away, then one close like someone tapping their side of the wall. The vault across from us was not closer. It was exactly where it had been. I said that out loud to myself, a little prayer of measurement. Not closer. Not closer. Not closer. Maya nudged my arm and pointed her chin not at the vault but at the path behind us. We turned and there it was, the same low white slab, same hairline crack across the top, same word on the face. It couldn't be the same one. We were greedy in our fear. We wanted it to be the same and we didn't. I couldn't feel my hands even though they were, I checked, attached to my arms. I don't know how to explain the sound that came out of me. It wasn't a scream. It was like a cough that didn't know where to go. Don't, Maya said, and I don't know if she meant me or it. The rain made a curtain. The water around the slab was clear while the rest of the aisle had gone gray. Under the clear water, I saw that there wasn't any bottom to it.
Not a pit.
Not a hole. I'm saying this terribly. I saw something that wasn't the earth. I saw a not place where the slab sat, like a shallow square absence of soil. My eyes hurt and I blinked and then the water was murky again, and I could pretend there was mud there after all. I stepped forward because humans are killers of good sense. I set my boot against the slab and pushed. It didn't budge. It didn't weigh anything and it didn't weigh everything. It simply was. I put my palm on the cold marble and thought about the word. I thought about the caretaker in the 80s scratching things he shouldn't have scratched. I thought about coins and knocks and rings on floors and felt like a kid teaching himself to swim in the deep end. Return to who? Andre had asked that first week. I opened my mouth to say, to where? My tongue touched the roof of my mouth. The rain in the cemetery got very loud, and in the loudness there was another sound, a speaking sound, not from the vault, not from the ground, not from me. It was the sound of 2 names being said together. Not my name. Not anyone living. I won't try to spell it because if I get it wrong, I'll be lying, and if I get it right, I don't want to know what happens next. I jerked back because I didn't want to hear it again. The slab was where it had been before we turned. The path was empty. The vault across the aisle was unmoved. It was like we had been allowed to look at something and then it closed the door. We left. We didn't run. We walked like people who had learned to leave a place slowly so the place doesn't follow. At the gate, the lock stuck. And for a stupid, awful second, we were the teenagers in a bad story with the keys clattering and the rain laughing. Then the key turned and we were out and the world smelled like wet asphalt, which is the same anywhere, and steadied me. I didn't sleep. I told myself I was being careful, but I was really just an animal awake in a different kind of dark. Around 5, the scraping started up in my kitchen wall again. I went in and set my hand flat on the plaster. It was cool and vibrating like a phone on silent. Please, I said. And this is the part I don't tell people in person because it makes me sound like I'm in love with the problem. Please, I said again, to a wall that had never cared about me in its life. The vibration stopped. There was one knock, just one. I took my hand away and saw a chalky smear on my skin. I went to the sink to wash it off and found my kitchen window fogged from the humidity. On the fog with a fingertip, someone had written one word, returned. Not in the shaky way we had seen it in the cemetery. In a neat hand, single stroke, like someone who writes on windows often, like a person who has time. I wiped it away too hard and left a streak that took the glass cleaner 2 tries to fix. I stood there a long time in a wet shirt in a room that smelled like lemon and whatever is under a lemon when you scrub. The project ended. We turned in our files. The city cut our checks. The email slowed and then stopped. I drove past the cemetery and didn't go in because I knew the gate guards by name, and did not want them to ask me to look at anything. I checked in with Maya, and she checked in with me like we were survivors of something that didn't officially happen. She moved back to Lafayette for school and says the walls in her new apartment are thick as cake. Andre took a job patching roofs and told us he likes working up there because nothing can knock from underneath. He sent us a picture of a penny he found bent into the shape of an oval, and we didn't answer for a day. Sometimes I walk past a cemetery that isn't St. Louis number 1. The city has so many, and I look for that word on any plain piece of stone. Sometimes I think I see it, and when I look again, it's a crack or a stain. The other day, crossing Canal, I felt a cold spot on the skin of my forearm like someone had pressed a coin there. I looked down and there was nothing, and I laughed because it was easier than crying about a nothing that knows your name. You can tell me I imagined it. You can tell me people move heavy things at night and enjoy their secrets. You can tell me that a word is a word, and that reclaimed stone gets passed around city projects like hand-me-down socks and the scratched letters were from somewhere else. You might be right. You might be smarter than me and better rested and less ready to listen at walls. But I will tell you this. I have learned the difference between a thing that wants to be found and a thing that wants to be noticed. They are not the same. When I place my keys on the counter now, I set a penny next to them. Some mornings there are 2 pennies. Some mornings there is 1. When it storms, I don't turn on music to drown the knocks out. I let them count themselves. I don't answer the door when no one knocks. And I sleep with my shoes by the bed because if the gate has to open, I'd like not to be barefoot for it. A few weeks ago, walking home alone after an early shift, I cut down Basin without thinking and found myself at the fence near St. Louis number 1 just before they closed. The guard on duty wasn't Felix and didn't know me. He leaned in his chair and looked at his phone. The light was the kind that turns everything honest for a minute before it gets to hide again. Through the bars, I could see the front path where the tours start, and on the left, halfway down, a low, plain vault had a few coins on it. I couldn't see the word from where I stood. Maybe it wasn't even that vault. Maybe this was a different one. The city is full of twins. The coins made a little line of dull fire. I waited there at the fence without meaning to, and the guard glanced up once and then forgot me again. I didn't see anything move. I didn't hear anything knock. The world smelled like wet stone and frying oil and the river. I put my hand on the iron fence and felt it cool against my skin. I thought I'd stand there until it felt dumb, and then I would go home and eat something and pretend I'd just been taking a walk. That was the plan. It was a good plan. Then the guard's chair squeaked and he said, polite, not bored, not surprised, "We're closing. Time to head back." He wasn't talking to me. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, through me, at something over my shoulder. I turned. The sidewalk behind me was empty. The street was doing its tired 5 p.m. dance. Still, I took a step back because there's stepping forward and there's stepping aside, and sometimes both feel like survival. The guard nodded like I'd done the right thing without him having to ask again. He stood to lock the gate and held it open wide for a beat too long before he swung it shut. I walked. I didn't run. The coins on the dish at home didn't add up to more than a few dollars when I counted them before bed, and that's nothing. That's less than a meter fee. I fell asleep with the kind of tired that has edges. In the hour before morning, the kind that lasts a decade, the scraping started up faintly like a pencil on paper and a cool draft moved across my bedroom floor. I didn't get up. I didn't tell it to stop. I didn't say please. I lay there and listened and tried to decide if the sound was in my walls or under my house or just behind my name in the air. I'm telling this now because it feels rude not to. Because if you live here or come here and a storm moves in and your keys aren't where you left them, and a coin you don't remember owning is warm in your palm, I want you to know you're not alone and you're not crazy. And also, you might be both those things, and it won't matter. If you go into St. Louis number 1 and a guide points to a plain vault and makes a joke about how the dead won't settle, and you see the word returned scratched into the marble like someone's poor, stubborn handwriting, don't leave a penny because you think it's cute. Don't touch the stone like you're making a wish. Don't tell your friends it's fun to get a little scared. Walk past. Walk steady. Don't look back when the urge tells you to. When you feel the knock under your feet later, in your own hallway, in your kitchen, in the throat of your house, treat it like the ocean, something huge that does not care but will answer if you call it the right thing. I haven't called it anything. I keep my words short. I keep my shoes ready. And when it rains in New Orleans and the cemetery floods and people say the dead float here, I nod like a local who knows what float can mean. It doesn't always mean up. Sometimes it means closer. Sometimes it means home. Sometimes it means you didn't move at all. Everything else did. And sometimes it just means the one word I've learned not to say out loud unless I have to. The word that waits for a storm and a hand on a wall and a person who will listen. Returned. Locals call it the Screaming Hill, like it's a joke told with a wink, but nobody I met in Gettysburg would say the name after dark. I moved there last fall to help my cousin Maya shoot a short documentary for her grad program. We wanted small-town ghosts and handshake history, veterans' breakfasts, lamplit walking tours, creaky porches where people told stories with the TV low and the dog snoring under the table. Real places, Maya kept saying. Nothing kitschy. She'd picked Gettysburg because it was saturated with history and grief she'd learned recorded well. It sits in the air like humidity. Microphones love it. I was the audio guy. I borrowed a Tascam recorder from the campus lab and brought my own headphones, the big kind that cup your ears and put the world in parentheses. My day job is not glamorous. I cut audio for ad spots and clean up hiss from old family tapes people mail in, but I've always been good at finding the sound inside the noise. Maya says I listen like I'm eavesdropping on the past. On our third day there, we met a historian named Daniel Whitaker at the Adams County Historical Society. Everyone called him Professor Whitaker, even though he wasn't attached to the college anymore. He had that look, tweed jacket, hair like he'd been arguing with it, kind eyes that switched to sharp when he started talking dates and regiments. He'd heard about Maya's project and offered to show us a spot the tour buses didn't go. The Screaming Hill? Maya asked. She said it like she didn't believe in it, but hoped she was wrong. Whitaker smiled without showing his teeth. People think the name is a joke. It's not. He told us about a mass grave found there in the 1920s after a lightning-struck chestnut fell and ripped open the earth. Shallow, he said. 6 men, uniforms in tatters, no heads. Likely post-battle executions, maybe deserters, maybe scavengers. The sheriff at the time made a mess of it. Records are spotty. Over the years, that patch got fenced off, then the fence came down. It's private land now. A gentleman from town owns it, but he hardly goes. Who would? Said the woman at the front desk. A white-haired local named Mrs. Dwyer who'd been pretending not to listen. You go there, things follow you home. Whitaker gave her a look. We don't frighten visitors, Beth. I won't have to, she said, sliding our sign-in sheet across the counter. The professor didn't offer us the hill right away. He took us to a quiet side room where he had permission to keep a few boxes from a retired colleague. He put on gloves and opened a ledger the size of a cake pan. The pages were the color of tea left too long. This is why I wanted to meet you, he said. A notation about the discovery. Sheriff R. Childers, June 1926. Listen. He read aloud, voice flattening into that careful rhythm academics use when they don't want to add anything with their tone. Mud, rain, thunder. 6 soldiers in shallow trench. Heads not present. Observed wind crying like wounded men. Also reported sound of names. The sound did not appear to come from any one direction. Wind sounding like names. Maya leaned forward. Like whose? Sheriff recorded only his own name, Whitaker said, tapping the margin where a pencil scrawl repeated Childers 3 times, the last one half erased. From that day on, people say the hill calls to you. Calls you by name if you stand long enough. I laughed, a nervous, stupid little sound that didn't fit the room. I'm not a ghost guy, but when I laugh like that, I know my whole body is telling on me. Don't go at night, Mrs. Dwyer said from the doorway, not looking at us. And don't bring anything that records. We went at night and we brought everything, not at first. We started with the kind of footage Maya likes. Main Street at twilight. Shopkeepers flipping signs, the glassy hum of cicadas, a group of reenactors off duty and smoking. Their blue trousers wrinkled above modern sneakers. The second week, Maya got contact info for the landowner through the professor. The land was a sagging Pennsylvania farm, more scrub than corn, with a sagging white house that hadn't seen fresh paint since I was in middle school. The owner, a man named Caldwell, shook our hands and kept asking, "Which professor sent you?" Like he might change his mind if it was the wrong one. When we said Whitaker, he nodded and gave us a key to the padlock on the rusted gate that led to an overgrown pasture. You'll hear things, Caldwell said, eyes on my recorder bag. Sometimes it's men screaming. Sometimes it's just the wind yanking the trees around. It'll sound like a big animal, like a bear. There aren't bears. It's always the wind. I asked if he ever heard his name. He didn't answer. He looked past us like he was waiting for someone else to arrive. Then he said, "You can go, but don't stay if your names come up. Don't stay to make your equipment happy. The hill likes you to linger." We went midday the first time. The hill wasn't dramatic. It was a long rise with a line of wind-warped oaks and a shaggy hawthorn cresting the crown. It looked ordinary, Maya filmed. I walked the perimeter throwing claps so I could mark the room tone later. The air tasted like iron. I thought of standing in a big freezer in a grocery store, the way the cold feels like it has weight. Nothing happened for 15 minutes. I recorded the nothing. The nothing was not nothing. When you listen to fields with headphones on, you hear layers. Insects on top of birds, on top of branchwood creaks, on top of airplane ghosts, on top of your own blood tapping. The screaming hill sounded like a field that didn't know you were there yet. Eventually, a breeze picked up and the trees did that thing where they rub small branches together like they're making a fire. The wind pressed down the grass in a long sigh, then lifted it again. It reminded me of a big animal breathing. Every so often it would gather itself in one corner of the field and then go racing through the grass like a hand. "It's lovely," Maya said, and it was. You can forget what you're looking for in a place like that. We didn't hear anything strange. Maya was almost disappointed. "People hype stuff," she said on the drive back. Professor Whitaker called that evening. "How did it go?" he asked. I told him the truth, that we got good footage and nothing else. "You'll want dusk," he said quietly. Like dusk was a flavor of ice cream we hadn't tried yet. That hill changes when the light goes sideways. We went again 2 days later and we brought a park ranger named Mark, who'd been friendly at the visitor center. Mark had the wide, patient shoulders of a guy who deals with dads who want to picnic on a cannon. He thought the hill was mostly nonsense, but he also brought a first aid kit, a thermal blanket, and a plan for who would run which direction if we needed to flag down help. "It's not a ghost problem most of the time," he told us. "It's a hole-in-the-ground problem, or someone twisting their ankle because they're watching the tree line instead of their feet." I set the Tascam on a tripod at the crest and clipped a lav to my jacket so we'd have two sources. Maya kept shooting wide so she could catch the oaks in silhouette. Dusk came on quick, a bruised dark filling in the low spots, and somewhere behind us a dog barked like a metronome, steady, unbothered. The wind lifted. It moved through the trees in waves. Every pass had a different voice. We listened. It's embarrassing to try to describe hearing your name in the wind. It doesn't sound like the wind is saying Daniel or Maya or whatever, not like a prank. It's more like it's imitating the shape your name makes in your head. The trees breathe and your brain fills in the rest, and suddenly your own name is happening inside your ears with force. I don't know how long we stood there before Maya said very quietly, "Did you hear?" "I heard something," Mark said. His voice had that controlled park ranger calm that says, "The situation is now very slightly different." I didn't say anything. I was listening to the recorder. The headphones made everything too close. Wind has fingers when you listen like that. It pats the mic, then pulls back, then rushes all the way to your elbows. If you ever want to feel like you're underwater on dry land, put on headphones in a place where the air is moving and wait. The first distinct thing I caught wasn't a name. It was counting. It came in under the wind like a child whispering into a cardboard tube. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. Then again faint, insistent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I pulled off one ear cup. Without the headphones, it was gone. When I put them back on, the counting was there again. Not louder, just sure. "I've got numbers," I said, and immediately wished I'd said nothing. Because the minute you announce something in a place like that, the whole world rearranges to make you right or wrong. Maya stepped closer, camera steady. Mark lifted his chin like he was trying to see something with his ears. The counting stopped on 6. All at once the wind pushed. The trees leaned and held. Leaves clattered like someone flipping through a crate of vinyl records too fast. Mark hissed through his teeth and pointed downslope. The grass had a darker stripe, like someone had dragged something heavy through it. The stripe ran from the foot of an oak to a shallow depression in the earth about 20 feet from us. Not a grave, not exactly. More like a place that didn't want to be stepped on. "We should go," Mark said. "We just got something," Maya said. "We got enough," Mark said. "The hill's starting to do its thing." "Which is?" I asked. "It makes you argue about staying," Mark said. and that would have sounded dramatic if his voice hadn't been so level. We left. The key squealed in the gate and Caldwell's dog was barking, and the lights in the farmhouse were off even though it was dinner time. And the whole drive back I kept one ear cup on to see if the counting would start again. It didn't. But when I scrubbed the audio that night in our little Airbnb, the numbers were plain as a clock. What bothered me more were the patches of silence. I mean, real silence, mathematically flat. Like someone had cut sections out of the track with scissors and taped it back together. Nothing between the waves. If that makes no sense to you, good. It didn't make sense to me either. Wind isn't silent. It's the opposite. But every 3 or 4 minutes there was a slice where the air stopped happening. I sent a clip to Professor Whitaker. He didn't text back, he didn't email the next morning either. By lunch, Maya had that look that means she's about to make someone's business her business. She called the Historical Society, then the college. Nobody had seen him. Mrs. Dwyer got on the line and said, "He said he was going to the hill last night to listen. Fool thing to do, but he's done it before." She used the past tense without meaning to, then corrected herself. We went to Caldwell's. He wasn't home. The gate was unlatched. My stomach was doing this slow roll like waves slapping a dock. Mark met us there and didn't give us the speech about permission. Just stepped around the gate like it wasn't there. We walked together up the rise, not talking. Like we were late for something, but not sure what. We found the professor's bag near the hawthorn, neatly set down, like he'd wanted his hands free for a second. His recorder was next to it. It looked identical to mine, same model, same little red light blinking to say, "I'm here, I'm working." I touched it and an old staticky cough came through the headphones I'd slung around my neck. I pressed stop. The light kept blinking. I pressed stop again. It kept blinking. I unplugged the mic cable. The light blinked. I took the batteries out. The light blinked. "Okay," I said, "because sometimes you have to say something to see if your voice still works." Maya found his footprint near the depression. "It rained a little last night," she said, crouching to look. He came up this way. He stood here. The wind combed the grass in a far-off sweep, and we all paused to listen in case it decided to call us. It didn't. It only made that long, strained sound old branches make when they've grown to hold each other up. Mark took out his phone. No reception. Mine had one gummy bar and couldn't connect a call. Maya held her camera like she wasn't sure if she was filming history or interfering with it. "Can you play back anything?" Mark asked me, nodding at the professor's recorder. "I don't want to," I said, and I didn't. That blinking light felt like a trapped thing you shouldn't tap on. "Play it," Maya said, so I did. I scrolled back to the beginning of the file and pressed start. The little screen had a timestamp, 9:12 p.m. the night before. The first minute was normal wind, bugs, and owl far off. A noise that might be an old fence wire humming against a post. Then Whitaker's voice, closer to the mic than it should have been. "Testing," he said. "Daniel Whitaker on the Screaming Hill. If anyone finds this, it's because I've made a mistake." He stood there for a long time, saying nothing, breathing, listening. I could hear the blood in his head like a faint drum. Then, as if he'd turned his back to the mic, he said, "Not tonight, gentlemen." The wind shifted. The tree creaks fell into that pattern we'd heard, like pages riffling, like counting. 1, 2, 3. I felt my throat go tight. "Say it," Whitaker said. "Not to us. If you have to." The wind breathed in. The mic hissed. Somewhere down the slope, something hit a branch and rattled off. Silence. The good, clean, empty kind. Not the cutaway I'd found in our audio. Then the lowest body deep sound I've ever heard on a recording. It wasn't a word. It was a throat opening. "Daniel," it said. Not in letters, not in syllables, but the shape of him. Maya reached for my arm and gripped until her knuckles went pale. Mark's jaw went crooked. He doesn't scare easy, but he listened like he was hearing a wild animal you cannot see. Wind again, hard enough that you can hear it slap the grass. "No," Whitaker said, firm. Then, "No." Another name shape, then another. Layered, the way echoes layer in a gym. It was like the hill was bringing up names from a well, one at a time, then the same one again. The third time it said Daniel, he said it back. Not his proud, steady professor voice, smaller, the way you talk to someone who needs you to be gentle immediately. "I'm here," he said. "I hear you." He shouldn't have answered. I knew that, even though I didn't believe in anything 5 minutes earlier. That hell of a red light was still blinking even though I was not playing anymore. You could feel that the equipment wasn't doing what the equipment does. This is the part where I should say we turned around and walked away. That's what Mark wanted. That's what he tried to say before the wind came down off the crown of the hill like a weight. It did not blow strong. It pressed. The temperature dropped so fast the metal zipper on my jacket stung my throat. The oaks all flexed at once and held. You know how a building feels when a truck goes past? That tremor that runs up the walls? The air did that. The ground did that. My teeth did that. Maya lifted her camera without looking down like she was on a rail and it was moving her. I grabbed her wrist. "We have to go," I said. The wind said my name or my brain pushed my name into it. I still don't know. But I heard it squeezed out like a secret, Thomas. You don't think about why your name matters until something else says it and there is a tug. Like your coat has caught on a nail and you didn't feel it catch, only the stop. Don't answer, Mark said. If you hear it, don't answer. Caldwell had said the hill likes you to linger. He didn't say it hates when you ignore it. The next breath out of the oaks had edges. The leaves rasped. Something in the depression clicked like glass. The professor's recording jammed. The sound of him walking, his breath, the wind, then flattened into that wrong silence like a piece cut out and replaced with nothing. "We're leaving," Mark said. He put his hand in the center of my back and pushed, like he was playing the world's slowest football 1 yard at a time. We moved. The wind pushed 2 sideways. The depression felt like a place on a map you used to go to as a kid that is now a strip mall. It hated our feet. Maya was half crying, half telling herself to focus. "Almost there," she said, like she was filming an endurance athlete. That's when we heard the scream. It was not a horror movie scream. It did not rise up like the music. It was the sound a person makes when someone surprises them in the dark and grabs their face. High, startled, private. It was a man's voice and not the professor's, and it came from just over the crown of the hill, the side we hadn't seen yet, as if the ground had scooped out a room and the voice was in it. Mark swore. At the same time he said, "Don't," but Maya was already moving toward the sound like a string was on her sternum and something had pulled it. I don't know if you love anyone like I love my cousin, but my body went after her before my mind could say do not. Mark caught my jacket. The fabric burned my neck. "Stop," he said, all the softness gone now. "It wants your feet there. You'll think this is dumb." I made myself look at my shoes and the ground under them. There's a switch inside all of us that keeps you from stepping down into basements when you can't see the bottom stair. I grabbed that switch. The scream didn't happen again. The wind did the counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It stopped. The silence felt like a mouth closed around us. I don't know how long we stood like that before we were walking. I don't remember the gate. My memory puts me at the car with the doors open and the dome lights painting our faces and all of us breathing like we'd run, though I don't remember running. Maya said, "We have to go back in the morning with more people." Mark said, "We call the sheriff and we call Caldwell, and we let this be the sheriff's problem." I pressed the professor's recorder into Mark's hands because I didn't want it in mine. The red light wasn't blinking anymore. It went dark when we reached the car, like it finally decided to obey a rule it had ignored in the field. There's a corner of my house where I hear the ocean, except I live 3 hours from the coast. If you put your ear to the corner, it's just the heating system whispering through the ducts in a way that tricks your brain. That's what the hill is like. You can tell yourself what you heard was 3 different winds and brain pattern filling, a recording glitch, a fox shrieking, and then you go home, and the corner of your house starts to sound like the ocean where there is no ocean. We did call the sheriff. Mark used a landline at a gas station because all of our phones refused to talk to anything. The sheriff came with 2 cars and 2 deputies and a dog that went stiff as a statue at the gate and would not cross. They walked the hill with flashlights like they were combing a stage for lost props. They found the professor's footprints and our footprints and a patch of grass pressed down, where someone had been on their knees. They found a button that looked old and a battery that looked new. They took the recorder and asked us to send the files we'd made. They said the professor might have gone home another way. Might be lying under a tree somewhere sleeping it off, might be visiting friends. One deputy kept asking me if I was sure I'd taken the batteries out. "Maybe you thought you did," he said, "because when people get scared they remember the sequence wrong. People misremember. People mishear. The next day they found nothing. The next week, nothing. By the time we left town, the professor was a local ghost story told in the present tense. Caldwell took his key back and put a chain on the gate. People said you could hear his name at night if you parked. halfway down the lane and turned off your engine and listened when the wind ran its hands along the fence. Maya finished her documentary with interviews and old photos. She left the screaming hill out. She couldn't make it fit without the thing eating the whole story. Mark wouldn't be on camera, only on audio, and even then he said less than he wanted because he understood that telling a story is one way of letting it closer. Every time you say it, he told me, you give it an inch. The evening before we drove back to Pittsburgh, Mrs. Dwyer called our Airbnb and said, "The professor left a box at the society for you." When we got there, she had wrapped it in a brown paper bag and tied it with a string like a pie. Inside were copies of record notations, a hand-drawn map of the hill from some 1940 survey, and a small wooden whistle with a crack down the side. The note with it said simply, "For when the wind is wrong, blow once." There was no signature, but the handwriting was his. I put the whistle on my dresser when I got home. I told myself it was a souvenir. For 2 months, life reassembled itself into all the little tasks that make it bearable. My day job sent me a batch of old cassette tapes to digitize for a family in Ohio. Decades of Christmas mornings and backyard birthdays. I took the hiss out and left the laughter in. Maya got notes from her advisor and fixed her final cut. Mark texted sometimes with pictures of sunrises over the battlefield. Like he was trying to replace one kind of witness with another. He always signed off, "Stay out of fields." I started to notice the corners of my place where the air seemed to stir even when the windows were shut. The hallway by the coat closet. The spot by the kitchen table where the linoleum bubbles up. At first it was nothing, or the same kind of nothing as before, the kind with layers. Then some evenings the vents would hum on and the hum would sit down in the room with me. And the little hairs on my arm would go up and I would think, without choosing the thought, if you say my name, I will leave this room and not come back. I never told Maya. She would have put it in her film, and then I would have had to hear it from my laptop. And that felt like inviting a version of the hill into the house. The last time I saw Professor Whitaker's handwriting was on my credit card statement. A weird place to notice it. There was a charge posted from a self-serve gas station outside of town, and the digital signature screen captured this hesitant, familiar D he always wrote with. The bank shrugged when I called. It was not his, they said. It was me. I probably signed sloppy. The station was one I had actually used. Still, that D hung in my eye for days, like something had tried his name on to see if it would fit and left the mirror askew. You'll want me to say we went back. We didn't. I have nothing to prove to a field. We told the story to the sheriff and to ourselves, and then we stuck it in the drawer where you put the weird thing that happened once. But sometimes at night the whistle on my dresser will roll a half-inch without any breeze, like the house shifting. Like a boat turning at anchor. I won't touch it. I won't put it elsewhere either. I leave it where it can see the door. Last week we got fresh snow, the kind that erases the road salt scabs and makes the streetlights feel like secrets. I woke up at 3:12 a.m. because something had changed in the quiet. My place is 3rd floor. There's no tree branch to scrape the window. The heat had clicked off, the refrigerator was between cycles, and even the traffic on the avenue had gone to zero. I knew then why people stand at the edge of the screaming hill and wait. Silence is not empty. It fills. I listened. And the wind, it was not wind, said my name without letters, and I did not say anything back. And for a second there was pressure in the room like a storm sitting down. The whistle rolled, tapped the wood of my dresser once like a finger on a desk, then stopped. I have the professor's files in a box by the door. Sometimes I think about mailing them back to the Historical Society with no return address. Sometimes I think about putting them in a lake. Sometimes I think about locking them in my car and parking on a different street every night, so the hill can't triangulate me. I don't do any of those things. I leave the box by the door and the whistle on the dresser and my name in my own mouth. 2 days ago I woke up to a voicemail. No call came in, only the message. The timestamp said 9:12 p.m. The old number from the professor's recorder, like the time itself, wanted consistency. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. Maya was there with pancakes, and Mark had stopped by with some excuses about a conference that didn't start until noon. We listened together. There was wind. There were insects. There was counting that stopped at 6. And there was the long unsound between the breaths of the trees. The slice of nothing where the world had been cut and taped back together crooked. Then a voice, thin and far like a man at the bottom of a stairwell, spoke as if the phone were a pipe connecting our kitchen to that hill. It didn't say help. That would have been something you could answer. It said almost conversationally, like he'd bumped into us at the library, "Don't answer when they teach you your names." I didn't recognize the voice. Maya did. I watched it happen to her face. "It's him," she said. Mark picked up the phone. He said into it, though we all heard his own advice drop out of his mouth as he did, "Daniel?" No one responded. Or maybe the world did, in that slight downward pull the house made as the air moved. We stood there too long. "We always do," the voicemail ended. There was no number attached. The hill does not leave a return address. The pancakes went cold. There's a version of this where I tell you it's over, that the sheriff found the professor drunk in a motel, or that the hill was bulldozed and turned into a cul-de-sac, and now the only screaming is toddlers at birthday parties. I could sell you that and we could all sleep. But last night the wind pressed a little at the window, just a suggestion through the cracks, the way a hand tests a door before trying the knob. I could hear leaves even though the trees here are bare. I could hear pages being turned too fast. And it taught me my name again. Patient this time, like a school teacher who knows you'll come along if they say it softly. I didn't answer. Instead, I lifted the little cracked whistle and put it to my lips and exhaled once. The sound it made was small and stubborn. It was one note. It hung in the room and was not pretty, but the pressure eased like the house had decided it had someplace else to be. I don't think you can win with something like this. The hill is not a person. The scream is not a voice. Or maybe it is 1,000 voices crowded into a throat the size of a field. Either way, I suspect what it wants is practice. It calls and it wants you to repeat, and eventually maybe it says something new, and you echo that too. And then one day you step forward without meaning to, and the ground is a little softer than you expected, and your friends call your name even though they shouldn't, and the red light on the recorder knows more about you than your own family does. I'm writing this down because I've started to think names aren't the only thing we give away when we stand in the wind too long. Stories might be another. You give them inches and they find your door. So read this, then fold it up, then put it somewhere the air doesn't move. And if you're ever around Gettysburg and someone offers to show you a place the buses don't go, tell them you like kitsch just fine. Stick to the gift shop. Buy the magnet, and if you go anyway, if you find yourself at the gate with the chain and the hawthorn, at the crown and the counting in your ear and the grass, leaning away from you like you're heavy, don't take a recorder. Don't take a whistle. Don't take anything that can teach you the shape of who you are said out loud by somebody else. If the wind says your name, let it be wrong. I don't post much and I don't chase clout. I'm writing this because I still wake up at 3:09 a.m. most nights, whether I want to or not. And because when the wind hits the oaks outside my new place, I hear chains creak where there aren't any. If you're from Savannah, you've probably heard some version of this story told on a trolley tour. The child beneath the oak behind the old plantation. The toys, the swing. I always rolled my eyes at that kind of thing. Then last August, for a few months, I was part of it. This happened on the south edge of Savannah, near a ruin everyone calls the Coleman place, even though the last Colemans left in the 1960s. The house is gone except for a brick chimney and a few sections of wall wrapped in wisteria. A massive live oak anchors the back corner of the property. Somebody tied a rope swing to one of its lowest limbs a long time ago. Behind the tree is a little rise in the ground like a blister. People say it covers a child's grave. There's no headstone. There never was. The setup is simple. Every week somebody leaves a toy on that little rise. Always something small. Marbles, a wooden car, a Barbie shoe paired with nothing, army men, a plastic ring from a gumball machine. Nobody admits to doing it. On stormy nights, the swing moves. That's it. That's the legend. I moved back to Savannah last year to help my mom after she had ankle surgery. By day, I worked deliveries. Evenings, I picked up a part-time gig with a walking tour company. Mostly checking off names and handing out ponchos when we got one of those 5-minute sideways Georgia downpours. Someone would tell the story about the child beneath the oak. The group would stand around taking photos, the guide would talk about the way the Spanish moss looks like hair in a breeze, and we'd leave. I kept the flashlight and the first aid kit and made sure nobody tripped on the roots. I guess my role in this started on a Tuesday at the end of August. Tuesdays matter. You'll see why in a second. The guide that day was Maya, my roommate. We've known each other since high school. She's the one person I know who can make a haunted story sound like a weather report and still have you hooked. It was late. The air had that damp smell it gets before thunder. We walked the group back past the ruin, and there it was, a small toy fire truck balanced on the dirt. The paint was chipped. The ladder still went up and down. I'd never noticed toys there before, but the group knew about them. Someone said, "Oh my God, it's true," and started filming. People leave things, Maya said. Flowers, toys, offerings, if you want to call them that. Little things for a little person. We did our loop, ended where the tour buses pick people up, and that should have been that. But the truck stuck in my head. 2 days later, I went back by myself during the day. The same truck was there, but the ladder was broken now, snapped in one place like someone had stepped on it. Nearby, there were the pale marbles, translucent blue, 3 of them in a little crescent. I don't know why I did what I did. Maybe it was the part of me that didn't believe. Maybe it was just boredom. I picked up one of the marbles and put it in my pocket. When I got home, I tossed it into the dish on our kitchen counter where we keep keys and random junk. It clicked against the metal and rolled into the corner. Maya saw me and raised an eyebrow. "You stealing from ghosts now? It's just glass." "Put it back," she said, laughing. "Mr. Dupree's going to chew you out." Mr. Dupree is the caretaker of sorts. He lives in a trailer a ways down the road from the ruin and walks the property with a long stick like a shepherd. He's quiet until he isn't, then speaks in a way that makes you feel like he already decided what he thinks of you 10 years ago. I shrugged off Maya's warning. I wasn't scared of a stick. That night we sat on the couch and put on some cooking show. Around midnight a breeze came through and the windows made that soft, long moan old houses make. Then right around 1:30 a sound like a bead dropping on tile came from the kitchen. Not loud. Just enough to make us both turn. Maya muted the TV. "Did you hear?" We both heard it again, a tiny, rolling tap. "Probably the AC kicking the vent," I said. Getting up. The dish was empty. I checked under it, in it, around it. I pulled out the drawer. Nothing. "Okay," Maya said. "Nope," and turned the TV back up. It bothered me. On Friday I went back to the oak. The marbles were there, 3 in a crescent. The truck's ladder was leaned against the base of the tree like somebody had set it that way on purpose. I know what you're thinking. I messed up and my brain made the world make sense to itself. Before I left, Mr. Dupree stepped out of the shade like a deer, quiet as anything for a man his age and size. "You left it," he said. "It wasn't a question. I just put it back." He shook his head. "No, you left it. Different things mean different things. If you don't know which is which, leave them where they are. I didn't take..." He raised the stick a little, not to hit me, to point at the oak. "Don't take what ain't yours." I told him I was sorry. He stared at me a long time and said, not unkindly, "You don't owe me. Just don't bother her." "Her?" He looked past me like he was watching something I couldn't see. "Your guide friend says words. Folks forget the land was full before her words. They can keep their stories. I mind the tree." Then he turned and walked away. That would have been the weirdest part, except it wasn't. The next week held a bunch of little things that looked like ordinary life until you lined them up. Our porch light burned out twice. We replaced the bulb both times. The second time, we opened the door to a new bulb, and a little plastic ring sitting on the mat, like something from a vending machine. It had a tiny heart on it. "Someone's messing with us," Maya said. "Probably kids." We didn't have kids on our block. It's mostly older folks, except for the college rental 2 doors down, where they throw quiet parties and apologize for being alive if they bump you on the sidewalk. One of the older neighbors, Miss Lila, brought us pound cake on Sundays. When I mentioned the ring, she pressed her lips together like she'd tasted something bitter. "Don't play around with that place," she said. "Some things stay where you put them and some things come when they're called." "We didn't call anything," I said. "You go someplace and put your hands on it, you called it," she said. "You're stronger than you think when you're not meaning to be." That Tuesday, it was always Tuesday, the toys changed. A tiny blue sneaker like from a doll appeared on the rise. A tin car with 1 wheel missing. A marble pale green this time. I only noticed because the tour stopped longer than usual. People kept asking questions. A couple with a toddler stood at the edge of the group. The toddler pointed at the swing and started crying. "It's okay," the mom whispered. "Baby, it's just a swing." The swing moved. Not a lot. Just a little, like someone put a hand to it. There wasn't enough wind for it. When we got home, Maya pulled her laptop and looked up the place, old newspaper archives and property records. If there's a haunting, there's a person. That was her rule of thumb. She found a listing from 1939 about the burial of a colored infant, a tragedy tucked in the back pages between produce prices, and a story about a church picnic. No name. She found a later article about a tenant farmer's little boy who drowned in 1952 in a flood that tore up the road. 2 kids, 2 eras, same ground. None of it was proof. It was more like the area had a dent in it. You don't think it's weird that it's always Tuesdays? She asked. People work. Tuesday's the day nobody's busy, I said. She zoomed in on a photo. In the background, the oak, smaller, but it was the oak, stood by a hand pump. There was a rope over the branch even then. Children in the foreground looked off to the side, maybe at the photographer, maybe at someone else. I don't know. One of them had a toy fire truck. That night, out of nowhere, our dog monitor buzzed. If you've never used one, it's a little camera you set up so you can see your dog in the house. We only used it when we were both out. We hadn't even turned it on. The screen lit up anyway. A line of static fanned across and then resolved into our living room. Blue-gray. Our couch, our coffee table, slight reflection in the TV. The mic indicator flickered, then like a kid talking through a pillow. Push me. Maya's eyes were shiny in the glow of the screen. That's a neighbor's kid on our Wi-Fi, she said, and her voice said she didn't believe it. I turned the monitor off. I unplugged it. It still took a long time to go black. We argued about whether to tell anyone. Tell anyone what? I said finally. That our monitor did a thing electronics do? She paced and chewed a nail and said, I don't think this is nothing. And then we were quiet a while and I put on a movie so we didn't have to talk. Wednesday morning, there were tiny footprints on the porch. Not barefoot. Sneaker tread the size of my palm, spaced wrong for an adult crouching and making a joke. Leading to the door, away from the door, smudged like someone stood and shifted weight. I told myself a neighbor kid had done it. I told myself maybe I'd left flour on the mat from baking the week before, and it took the impressions better. I told myself whatever I needed to get to work and then to the tour shift that evening. We got a bigger than usual group because thunderstorms were on the radar, and tourists love to be scared if you promise them a poncho. The sky was that flat metal color it gets when nothing's decided yet. We stood beneath the oak and Maya told the version of the story she tells when children are in the group. Like a lullaby, without the sharp edges. Something about it felt heavier. I thought I could hear a humming, a little hiccup of a song. When I looked up, the leaves were barely moving. The swing drifted back and forth an inch or two. Jamal, a friend of mine who sometimes tagged along to practice his photography, took a few shots. He showed me the playback. The photos were sharp. In one of them, there was a smudge near the swing. Not a lens flare, not a bug, not dust. I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be so bad I tried to argue it into being a spider web catching light. On a dumb impulse, I set up a cheap trail cam I'd bought to catch raccoons getting into the garbage. I tucked it behind the base of the chimney, aimed at the oak. It felt ridiculous. We finished the tour, took the group back and walked to the car. Leave it, Maya said. See what you see, or don't. Nothing's going to happen, I said. Maybe you already guessed the time. The camera captured a lot of nothing for a long time. Bugs. A moth landing on the lens like an eclipse. Branches shifting. Then at 3:09 a.m., the swing moved harder than the wind justified. The rope tightened and slackened like it was resisting a push. Another thing happened that the pixelated night vision makes irritating to describe. There was a shape. Small. The outline was wrong for an animal, wrong for a person, like it was made out of the idea of a person. For 2 frames, it was there. For 1 frame, it was closer. Then it wasn't. I didn't sleep Wednesday night. Thursday, when I went back, there was a new toy. A small tin whistle with a dent along one side. I don't know what part of me thought it was smart to lift it to my mouth, but I did. The sound didn't come out right. It was air pushed through an elbow of metal and nothing like a note. When I lowered it, Mr. Dupree was already there as if he'd grown up out of the weeds. Don't, he said. I wasn't going to take it. That ain't the kind of don't, I mean, he said. He looked tired. There's more than one, he added after a moment, almost an apology. Folks think there's just one because they like it simple. This ground has more hurt in it than one child could carry. I asked him about the Tuesday thing. He said, some weeks the Tuesday is you. Some weeks it's another you. People get heavy on a day without knowing why. It rained that night, not hard. just enough to make the bark smell alive. The swing moved again. I watched from the path, too far away to be useful if anything bad happened, like a guy at the beach taking a video of a water spout instead of going inside. A small voice behind me said very clearly, "Push me." I turned fast enough to make myself dizzy. The path was empty. I left a toy then. I don't know why. I had a little plastic shark from a keychain that broke. I set it on the rise and said out loud because it felt dumb to only think it, "I'm sorry I took the marble here." I don't know how to explain what came next without sounding like I'm trying too hard. The air changed. It got polite, like the way a room feels when a child who is about to cry decides not to. Then the swing bumped forward and back, not playful, not angry. Just a little motion that felt like acknowledgement. 2 days later, we found a toy on our porch again. A small wooden yo-yo, scratched but smooth. The string neatly wound. The kind you get from a craft fair where they insist on calling it artisanal. It sat in the center of our doormat like a place setting. Maya picked it up, flipped it in her hand, handed it to me and said, "You take that back." I didn't put it here. I know. Just take it back. When things escalated, it was a storm. Of course it was. The whole week, the radio warned about a line of thunderstorms and a chance of a tropical system pulling north. People filled sandbags even though we're far enough inland that it's usually more about tree limbs and power lines. Tuesday felt like someone's breath held all day. The air was hot. Everything else was gray. At about 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't go." "The oak is heavy tonight, Mr. Dupree," I told Maya. She looked at the window, the way the trees were already swaying, and said, "We should do the reasonable thing and not go out in this." At 10:30, the dog monitor turned on by itself again. Even unplugged, it hummed. The blue-gray image washed across the screen. The sound cut in and out like waves on a bad radio. I heard it, no static masking, no distance, like a small person close to the microphone, almost courteous. "Push me." I don't know how to defend what I did next. Reasonable would have been to sit down, ignore it, wait it out. Instead, I put on a rain jacket and grabbed my keys. "You don't have to come," I said, like I was offering a choice I knew she'd take. Maya stared at me, then pulled on boots. "I'm not letting you be the dumbass who goes alone," she said. "We're dumber together." My buddy Jamal texted as we were leaving, storm pictures guy, and I sent a stupid half-joke. "Going to get evidence of extra creepy swing time, you in?" He replied with a thumbs up and 5 minutes, which in Jamal time meant 10. He met us at the end of our block, tossed his camera bag in the back seat and climbed in grinning like he knew he should be embarrassed for wanting to come and wasn't. The road out there floods if a squirrel sneezes. By the time we turned off the main drag, we were driving through long, shallow ponds where the yellow lines vanished. The live oaks along the road bent in unison. The plantation's drive is 2 ruts and a promise. We crawled down it and parked where the ground rose a little. The rain had a body to it, heavy and constant, each drop big enough to feel individually. The 3 of us jogged the last stretch, heads down, shoulders hunched. The swing was moving by the time we got there. I've seen rope swing in wind. This was different. The seat scraped the bark as if someone short was trying to get momentum, but kept dragging their toes. The rise behind the oak had slumped a little under the rain. The toys, today it was a little plastic horse, a yellow ball, and a key with no teeth, were half sunk in mud. "Okay," Jamal said, almost cheerful through the rain. "That's a lot." A flashlight beam hit us. "You can't be out here," a voice shouted. A sheriff's deputy, Torres, I learned later, was tromping up the path, jacket soaked through, hat plastered to his head. Mr. Dupree called in trespassers. "That's fair," Maya said. "We're sorry." She touched my sleeve, a steadying thing. The swing stopped. It didn't slow. It stopped. The rope tightened and then hung straight down. All the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood up. In that pause, a smaller sound, a hiccup of laughter. "Not behind us, very near. Who's there?" The deputy called. Not because he expected an answer, but because cops ask that when they're easing into something they don't understand. A shape moved at the edge of the light. Small. Child height. Not running. Walking, careful, straight toward the rise. "Hey," I said, and I hated how my voice sounded, like I was trying not to scare a stray cat. "Hey, sweetheart." The figure reached the mud and crouched. It didn't displace water. It didn't make the squelch a person makes. It was like watching rain pretend to be a person. It reached for the yellow ball and set it on a firm patch of dirt, like it didn't want it to float away. Then it stood and took a step toward the base of the tree, a precise step, and the ground gave. The top layer of sod slid off like a lid. The earth sank in a soft V that widened into a dark oval. The little shape slipped forward and vanished. I moved before I thought. I dropped to my stomach and reached toward the hole. Mud came up past my elbows. The smell was old, not rot, but the way old cloth smells when you open a trunk. Something brushed my fingers. It was not a hand grabbing me. It was pressure, as polite as earlier, pushing my fingers up and out. Behind me, Maya lay flat and caught my belt so I wouldn't slide in. Jamal braced her ankles. The deputy swore once, low like a prayer and not profanity. Flashlights flooded the hole. The rain made it hard to see depth. I expected to glimpse bones like a Halloween decoration in bad taste. There was none of that. There was, right at the edge, the corner of a small wooden box. Lid rotted thin but still hinged. The deputy reached for it with 2 fingers like it might bite and eased it toward the edge. He looked at me and then at the hole again and said, "Don't move." He got the box up. It wasn't big. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were things that had belonged to someone small. A button with thread still in it, a bent hairpin, a scrap of paper with writing that water had eaten to the edges, a little tin soldier missing its head. There was also a leather bracelet stamped with 2 letters, E and R, overlapped like a cattle brand. "Back up," the deputy said. A gentle order. He called in what he called grounds disturbance and potential human remains. He told us and Mr. Dupree, who'd come up silently to stand at the edge of the light, to wait by the cars. We waited in the rain until more lights came. It took a long time. The storm made everything take a long time. When people started moving around the place in official ways, I felt something let go, like the night had been holding us in its hand and then set us back down. Around 3 a.m., someone from the medical examiner's office told us they couldn't do much until daylight. They taped off the area and left a deputy to sit in his vehicle and keep watch. Mr. Dupree walked to us, water slicking his face. "I told you not to come," he said, but there wasn't anger in it. "You texted me," I said, and then, because the absurd is always present even when you're scared. "You have my number?" "I got a phone," he said, and then quieter. "Thank you for putting it back." He meant the marble. He meant the apology. He meant the toy shark I'd left. Maybe he meant all of it. We went home. The power had blinked out while we were gone. We dried off and sat on the floor and listened to the wind pressure the house and make the windows tick. Neither of us said much. When the storm finally weakened, we slept for an hour like people pulled down into water. In the morning, the tape was still up at the site. The ground around the hole looked oddly neat, peeled back like a careful hand had opened a book. They brought in people from the Historical Society. Someone said the old records had been wrong about where the tenant cemeteries were. Someone argued it wasn't a cemetery at all but a single burial. Maybe of an infant, maybe a child, maybe not even human. They said it could have been an animal. The longer they talked, the more the sharpness of the night dulled down into bureaucratic unknowing. The toys stopped for a few weeks. People posted that the spell was broken if there was a spell. The tour company asked us not to take groups back there until the ground was stable. Mr. Dupree stood near the tape most afternoons, not to keep people out, but to be present. Once when I brought him coffee, he told me, "It ain't that they leave because you found a thing. It's that a thing was found because something was ready." He didn't say what he meant by they. I slept better. The monitor stayed dark. The porch stayed clean. Then one Tuesday, a month later, a new toy showed up at the oak. I didn't see it. Other people did. Someone put it on Instagram. A tiny red yo-yo, scratched, string neat. The comments filled up with theories. Some said it was a copycat. Some said it was a reminder that the past doesn't go anywhere. We moved at the end of October. Not because of this. Because our lease was up, and Mom didn't need me in the same way anymore, and Maya got a job in Charleston. I packed in a rush and didn't notice the yo-yo until I opened the last box in the new place, and it rolled to a stop at my feet. Not the Instagram one, ours. The string was wound the way I wind things, badly, with a little kink near the base. I hadn't packed it. I hadn't seen it since the night before the storm. I didn't tell Maya. She had her own sleep to protect. I put the yo-yo in the dish where I keep my keys. That night at 3:09, I woke up without an alarm. No sound, no reason, just open eyes and the sense that I should be awake. The house was quiet. Our phones were face down. There was no breeze. But somewhere at the border of hearing, so faint that when I tell people about it, they say I'm describing a dream. A rope creaked once and then stilled. If you go out there now and stand by the oak on a Tuesday, you'll see a toy most weeks. Sometimes it's big enough you can't ignore it, like a rubber ball. Sometimes it's little, tucked into the roots. People leave them, because people want stories to have places to go. People take them because people are people. I don't take anything from that place anymore. When the wind gets up at night, I picture a small weight settling onto a rough wooden seat, and a polite little voice that never sounds mad, just expectant. I still have the bracelet. I didn't take it from the box. The deputy handed it to me the next day because I was the one who reached for it, which didn't make sense then and makes less sense now. E and R overlapped like a brand. I asked the Historical Society if they'd found anything that matched those initials. They shrugged and said records from tenant families are broken. There were years when people's names were optional in Savannah, and years when people's names were stolen on purpose. One of the archivists, a man my age with a neat haircut, said, "You'd be surprised how much a place forgets on purpose. Sometimes I dream I'm pushing an empty swing. I wake up with the sense of having done something decent that still isn't enough. Those nights I get up and look at the dish where my keys and the yo-yo sit. On 2 of those nights, the yo-yo wasn't there. The next morning it was back. This will sound ridiculous, but both times I checked the odometer on my car. I'd put miles on it while I slept, not many. Enough to drive out where the asphalt ends and the live oaks lean. If you ask me what I think happened, I won't give you a clean answer. I don't think there's one child under that oak. I think the ground remembers and lends out its memory when the wind's right. I think people like me are good at calling things whether we mean to or not. I think some of us answer when something small and polite asks to be pushed, because it's better to be the kind of person who says yes to that than the kind of person who locks the door and pretends not to hear. Last week, on a day the forecast promised sun and we got it, I drove back. No tour, no group, no Jamal with his camera. Mr. Dupree saw me and didn't say anything. He nodded to the oak. There was a toy on the rise, a cheap plastic ring with a tiny heart on it. I set the yo-yo next to it. I didn't say anything. The swing didn't move. The ropes were still, like sleeping. I stood a while anyway, because sometimes you stand with someone you care about even when they don't ask you to do anything. That night, 3:09 came and went. No creak, no monitor flashing blue. A good sleep. The next morning, there was a little wet footprint on my kitchen tile. Just one, heel midsole toe, about the size of my palm. I stepped over it and didn't wipe it up. By afternoon, it had evaporated on its own. The yo-yo was back in the dish. The string was wound much neater than I know how to wind it. I want a lesson here, something to wrap with a bow that makes everyone feel like the world follows a rule we can use. I don't have one. I have a tree, a Tuesday, a time that wakes me up. I have a dish with a toy in it I return when it's asked for. And I have neighbors who bake pound cake and tell the truth in a voice that makes me want to argue and then not argue. I have the sense that the past isn't past so much as it is patient. If you go, don't take anything. If you must leave something, make it simple. Marbles are best. They stay where you put them until they don't. And if the swing moves and a little voice asks what every kid asks, even the ones the ground remembers, keep your answer kind. You don't have to push, but don't tell it no. Let the wind say no for you. Let the tree decide. That's what I do most nights. I lie still and listen. The house breathes. The rope creaks once like a door closing somewhere inside a house that isn't mine, and the feeling passes. Then I sleep. Or I don't. Either way, morning comes, and with it, the ordinary-sized things, coffee, keys, a small toy on a mat that wasn't there before, a swing I didn't touch moving as if someone small and unseen still plays there. I'm not asking you to believe any of this. I'm just asking you not to go looking for it. If you know the foothills west of Denver, the scrubby slopes and old mining roads that twist up into pines and decomposed granite, you probably think you've seen it all. Abandoned shafts, broken stamp mills, rusty head frames. You haven't. There's a grave out there. It's encased in wrought iron like a dog kennel someone forgot to bring inside for the winter. And if you've heard the story locals tell, the one about lightning in '64 and the empty coffin, you already know how this is going to end. My name's Ben. In late September, a couple years back, my friend Mark and I took a weekend to scout an old claim site for a photo project. Mark restores historical mining photos for the museum down on Broadway. I hike and do drone videos for a side gig. We figured we'd camp just one night, shoot some footage at dawn, and be back in the city by Sunday dinner. It wasn't a big deal. It was supposed to be a quick trip. Lena, my girlfriend, didn't come. She'd sprained her ankle and stayed in town. She did what she always does, though. Asked for the GPS coordinates, double-checked the weather, and made me promise I'd text when we reached the trailhead. I joked about sending her a selfie with a ghost in the background. She didn't laugh. We left Denver before sunrise on a Saturday. The sky over the plains was a flat gray sheet, like someone had stretched cold metal over the city. By the time we hit Golden, the light turned that old film color you only see in September. We climbed through a canyon of red rock, joined a dirt forest road, and started seeing the signs. Keep out. Abandoned mine. No motor vehicles beyond this point. Danger unstable. The usual. At a wide pull-off with a fire ring made of balled-up beer cans, we met the first person who would have saved us a lot of trouble if we'd listened. He was a tall guy in a brown jacket, late 50s maybe, with a thermos in one hand and a black dog stretched in the dust at his boots. He had the look of every mountain person I've known. Friendly if you're respectful, a wall if you're not. "You boys heading to the old camp?" he asked. "Which old camp?" Mark said. It was a joke, but the guy didn't smile. "Doesn't matter what they called it," he said. "It's not open land beyond the turn. The county won't come get you if you put your foot through something. We're not going underground," I told him. "Just photos. We'll be careful." He took a sip from the thermos, then pointed his chin up the road. "You'll pass a meadow with a stone foundation. Past that's a stand of dead lodgepole. When the road hooks right, don't keep straight. Don't climb to the crest, and if you hear anything like a gate, turn around." He looked at us like he was trying to decide if we were stupid or just young. You hear a gate ring in the woods, you don't go looking for it. "What kind of gate?" Mark asked. "Just don't," the man said. "I'm telling you because no one told me." He whistled for the dog and headed down the way we came. We watched him go until the trees swallowed him, the dog's tail flicking like a metronome. Mark shook his head. "Every trail has one," he said. "The hermit who warns you about the witch." "Come on," I told him. "Let's be respectful. If we hear a gate, we bail." We drove on. The road grew narrower, pocked with roots and softball rocks. We passed the meadow, the stone foundation crumbling into itself. We passed the dead trees, gray trunks standing like rotten teeth. The road hooked right. There was a faint track straight ahead, almost more animal than human. Mark looked at me. I looked back. He grinned. 5 minutes, he said. "If it's bad, we turn around." I should have insisted. I should have listened to the man with the thermos and the dog and the voice like a closed door. Instead, I put the car in park and we shouldered our packs. We walked the track in that quiet that only happens at altitude, where sound gets eaten by needles and distance. After 20 minutes, the pines thinned. The track ended at a low ridge of broken rock. On the other side was a shallow bowl with scattered stumps and grass. Someone had cleared it 100 years ago and then given up. In the center of the bowl was a shape like an empty corral. It was the iron grave. If you've never seen an iron cage around a grave, the way it sits in the earth is wrong. Fences go around property. Bars go around animals and cells. This thing, this pen, went around the size of a person, 4 by 7 feet maybe. Wrought iron twisted and looped into spearheads and spirals that were more decorative than they needed to be. Like someone couldn't stop adding flourishes even while they were making a cage. The top was a grid. The whole thing was set in concrete that had cracked and settled, and the grass around it didn't grow right. It was pale and thin like hair after a fever. I took my phone out and shot a quick video. The bars were black, but the cut ends where the iron had been sawed for the gate were orange with rust. There was a padlock, but it wasn't locked. It hung there like a ring on a finger someone didn't want to wear anymore. "Okay," Mark said, too loud. "That's a choice." We circled the cage. There was a marble marker inside, low to the ground, tilted. No name. Just a date, 1964, and a short line that didn't match the stone. "You shouldn't have watched." "I've heard something about this," Mark said. "Lightning hit the grave during a storm that year. Split the earth open. When they came to check, the coffin was empty. People think it was grave robbers. Then why the iron?" I asked. "To keep the next one in," he said. That wasn't funny, but he tried to grin anyway. We stood there listening. The air tasted like old pennies. Somewhere far off a jay screeched. I heard, I swear, a faint metallic sound like wind going through fence wire and a hard ring. A note you play by hitting iron with iron. I looked at Mark. He looked at me. Probably cows, he said, but there were no cows. We set up camp at the edge of the trees a good 50 yards from the cage. No fire. There was a ban, and besides, it was one of those tides of heat and cool you get up there. Warm when the sun hit you, cold the second it slid behind a ridge. I set my little fabric chair facing the grave because I wanted to keep an eye on it, and then I laughed at myself because that sounded idiotic. We ate wraps we'd made that morning. We passed Mark's old flask back and forth. A pair of hikers came by around 5. A woman in her 30s and a boy who could have been her brother or son. They slowed, took in the cage, and didn't approach. The woman raised a hand at us in that cautious way people have when they're not sure if you're weird. We waved back. They moved on quickly. The boy kept glancing over his shoulder and counting under his breath. I know because when the wind paused, I could hear it. 4, 5, 6 later, a county truck drove the logging road beyond the ridge. We could see the cab through trees. The ranger inside didn't look down at the bowl. It was like he didn't want to. The light drained out of the sky too fast, as it does in the mountains. The trees turned to cutouts. The iron cage was a blunt shape in the middle of the bowl. The words on the stone were just a smear in the dark. At dusk, I checked my phone for reception to text Lena we were okay. No bars. Mark stuck his phone on airplane mode to save battery. "I'll fly the drone at first light," he said. "Get some swoops over the grave and the foundation." I didn't respond because the air shifted and I heard it again. A faint metal sound, not wind this time. A tap, then another like the hiccup of a faraway bell. Mark froze. "Gate," he said carefully. It came once more and then stopped. We sat very still for a long minute, listening to the world not make that sound anymore. When nothing else happened, Mark exhaled and tried to turn it into a joke. "Could be the padlock swinging," he said. "Could be a cowbell. Could be a prospector ghost letting us know he disapproves of our tent brand. Could be we leave," I said. "We'll see what it looks like in the morning," he said. "If it feels weird, we hike out." That was the last sensible thing we said for the next 12 hours. Sometime after full dark, Mark got up to take a leak and came back whispering my name. "Ben," he said, "don't stand. Just look." I propped up on my elbows and peered through the tent screen. Moonlight silvered the bowl. The iron cage sat where it had sat. The padlock hung where it had hung. But the gate, the hinged section with the cut ends, was sitting open like a mouth. "Wind?" Mark said softly. "There's no wind," I said. There wasn't. The trees were still. The ground was listening. We watched the gate. It didn't move. The moon ducked behind a thin cloud and came back out. A tiny scraping sound came from the cage like gravel being pushed, and then nothing. When I finally slept, it was that surface sleep you get in airports and hospital chairs. I dreamed I was staring at a screen and a little loading circle went around and then stopped. And the word watch appeared, and something tugged my eyelids open with fingers that weren't there. At first light, cold sweat dry on my chest, I unzipped the tent, stood, and saw boot prints in the dirt, not ours. They came from the trees, circled the cage, and then went back into the trees, small like a kid's or a woman's. The treads were shallow and old-fashioned, little squares instead of the big chevrons modern boots have. The prints faded a few feet into the pines and vanished. Mark saw them too. He squatted, touched one, and hissed like he'd touched a stovetop. "It's cold," he said, and shook his fingers like that meant anything. We ate in a hurry. Mark launched the drone like it was going to solve something. It went up humming. On his controller screen, the bowl looked harmless, like a model train set. He flew a slow circle over the grave. The gate was closed again in the feed. I looked up. It was closed in real life, too. I hadn't heard it close. "Get closer," I said. He eased the drone down until we could see the iron loops in crisp gray. The padlock hung from the gate's hasp. There was a faint dusting of something on the marble stone. Little black seeds. "What's that?" I asked. "Pine cones," he said. But there were no pine cones that small. He swept the drone camera off the cage to give a sense of place. Trees, ridge, sky, and the feed glitched. For a second, the screen went black and white in a way that wasn't a filter, and a shape passed across the lens that looked like a person walking up out of the ground underwater. He pulled back instinctively. I was already running over. The cage sat quiet and stupid in the grass. The little black seeds were dead flies, a neat drift on the marble. They hadn't been there the night before. Their bodies were intact. No ants had come for them. "Let's go," I said. I didn't have to argue anymore. The part of Mark that likes to prod and poke for a better story had gone quiet. He nodded and started stuffing gear into his pack. He didn't bother with the tent poles. He balled the tent in his arms like a drowning man hugging a life ring. We left the bowl and started back down the track. Every few minutes I'd hear that gate sound again. A dull ring you couldn't place. Distance does funny things in the hills. And I'd pick up the pace. The road appeared ahead, a strip of light between trees. And then a voice said my name as plain as if someone had whispered it in my ear. I spun around. No one was there. The trees were there. The track was there. Mark was a step ahead of me, almost trotting now, breathing through his mouth. The voice didn't come again. I didn't tell him I'd heard it. We made it to the car, threw our gear in like we were burglars, and started down. Half a mile later, Mark swore and braked. The man from the morning, Thermos dog, stood in the road, hand up. I rolled the window down to my own surprise. "You went anyway," he said. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "We're leaving," I told him. He nodded and studied our faces the way a medic studies a wound to see if you understand you've been cut. "If anything follows you," he said, "it's not mine to fix. But you can try this." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small iron ring like the kind you tie a horse to. It was rusted. He held it in his palm like a coin you'd show someone to make a point. "Nail this to your door. If something walks by that belongs on the other side of a fence, it won't come in." I took the ring because anything is better than nothing. "What is this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Something I wish someone had given me when I was your age." I wanted to ask him what he'd seen, what he knew. But the dog whined and pawed the dirt, and he stepped aside and waved us on. "Don't go back," he said. "You'll think you have to, but you don't." We drove in silence until we hit pavement. With service back, my phone blew up. 2 texts from Lena. "You there yet?" And 15 minutes later, just checking in, a missed call. The timestamp on the missed call said 2:19 a.m., and the label under it said unknown caller. The location tag said the name of a forestry road we'd driven past the day before, but never turned onto. I hadn't had service at 2:19 a.m. I shouldn't have had anything. Back in Denver, I put the iron ring above my apartment door like an idiot and laughed at myself for doing something Lena would roast me for. She didn't roast me. When she came over that night, she didn't make a joke. She stood in the doorway under the ring and said, "I don't like the way the air feels in here." "Did you burn something?" "Eggs," I said quickly. I hadn't. We ate in front of the TV to avoid talking about the trip, like if we didn't say it out loud, its edges would get dull. At 2 in the morning, I woke to the buzz of my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit the room. An unknown number. No location this time. I let it buzz and stop. A second later, it started again. I put it on silent and turned it face down. It buzzed anyway. When I picked it up, the screen didn't show a movement call. It showed a calendar event for 2:19 a.m. 2 words, "Watch tonight." I clicked it and got the spinning wheel. The event disappeared. I turned the phone off and on. It didn't come back. At 2:19 a.m., something touched my front door. Not knocking. Not rattling the knob. A press like someone leaned their head against it to listen. The wood flexed in that minute way old doors do. The iron ring above the frame made a faint, strained sound like cooling metal. And then whatever weight was there lifted and the building settled and a car hissed by on the street below, normal as anything. In the morning, I told myself it was the neighbors. I told myself a lot of things. I went to work. I edited footage that wasn't around a grave. I didn't open the videos from the bowl. When I got home, there was an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a black and white photocopy of a short article from a local paper, dated July 1964. "Lightning strikes grave at abandoned mine cemetery," it said. Coffin disturbed. There was a paragraph about county workers repairing the site and adding ironwork to discourage further vandalism. At the bottom, someone had underlined a sentence with a green pen. The deceased's final note, discovered among his effects, requested he not be permitted to come out after death. There was no signature on the envelope. I called Mark. He hadn't gotten one. He sounded wrong. His voice cracked like his throat was dry. "You still have the drone footage?" he asked. I told him yes, and he said we should review it together. I said okay, and we set a time for Saturday. He canceled an hour before, then he stopped answering texts. Lena came over that night, sat on the couch as if she had to hold the room in place and said, "I've been having that thing where you wake up, but you're not awake, you know? I keep seeing your window from outside like I'm standing on the fire escape, and you're sitting on the couch behind the glass and you're not doing anything but watching the blank TV. I knock and you don't turn, and then I realize it's not you. It's me in there, and I can't figure out who's outside. Does that make sense? Don't do that, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Do what? She asked. Make it bigger, I said. Don't make it into a thing. Okay, she said. But throw out that ring. I didn't. I wasn't that dumb. The next day, I found a note taped inside my front door. Not outside. Inside. It was a strip of masking tape and a piece of torn lined paper, and on it in flat black marker, neat like a teacher, were the words you shouldn't have watched. My brain did what brains do to protect themselves. It went to logistics. I checked the locks. I checked the windows. I checked the back fire escape. I called the building manager and said my lock needed to be rekeyed because of a weird break-in. He came up, shrugged at the ring above my door and said, "My grandma had one of those. Iron keeps the fae out." Then he laughed and said he was kidding, but the laugh didn't stick in his throat the way a good laugh should. Mark finally called late that night. He sounded like he was wearing someone else's mouth. "Come over," he said. "I need you to see this." I drove to his place in Baker. His lights were on. His curtains were closed. The door was open. That shook me, but he stepped into the hallway quick and said, "Sorry, come in, I don't want to leave it alone." We sat at his desk. He opened the drone footage and scrubbed to the part where the screen had glitched. He played it frame by frame. The shape, like someone wading up through clear water under the metal grid, folded out of the grass and into a person. It wasn't a face, not in the way you'd recognize one. It was a person the way you sometimes see one from the corner of your eye at a bus stop when you're thinking hard about something else. It was a shape with intent. "This is stupid," Mark said. He laughed, and it was the laugh of someone who'd forgotten how. "This is compression. This is a digital artifact." The shape angled toward the drone like it could feel the lens. The drone's camera refocused, and for one frame, I saw an iron bar where the air should be. Not in the cage. Hanging in the world like a rule. Then it was gone, and the grave was a grave, and the grass was just that. "Delete it," I said. "Ben," he said, and he looked at me like I'd suggested he delete a video of his kid's first steps. "This is the only thing that tells me I didn't imagine it." I shook my head. "It's the thing that keeps you imagining it." He didn't delete it. I left his apartment after midnight. In the stairwell, the lights went off, motion sensors on a timer, and the dark had a texture to it like fur when you stroke it the wrong way. On the street, a bus hissed at a stop. A woman in a red coat talked into her earbuds and laughed, real and normal. I walked home fast in that way you pretend you're not. I opened my door and ducked under the iron ring like a superstitious ball player under a locker room sign. I locked the door. I put a chair under the knob. I went to bed with the covers pushed down because I didn't want that old, stupid fear of something pulling them tight across my face. At 2:19 a.m., the phone on the nightstand lit up on its own. The screen was black, then it wasn't, like it had opened its eyes without me. I had turned the phone off. I was sure I had. A video started to play. It was a clip of my living room window from the outside, like someone had filmed from the fire escape. The camera panned to the glass and held. Behind the window, my couch, a dark room, and then I saw a shape sit down on the couch and turn toward the screen and tilt its head like it was wondering if this was the right angle. It wasn't me. I was in bed watching this, but it wore my shape the way a coat wears a person. The iron ring above the front door made that strained, cooling metal sound again. The thing on the couch cocked its head as if it had heard it too. It didn't stand. It didn't move. I reached for the lamp and stopped. If I turned the light on, I thought, it would turn its head toward the bedroom door and look. I don't know why that seemed like the worst thing, but it did. I moved my thumb on the screen and the video progress bar slid to the end. The final frame froze. There was a tiny reflection in the window glass that I hadn't noticed at first. A grid just for an instant. Like a square of iron bars held up to the lens, then moved away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I decided to go back. I can't explain it. I could make something up about closure, about facing fears, about getting the shot so Mark would finally delete the footage. That would be the story version. The truth is uglier because it's simpler. I had the sense that something had been left open, and the open thing was me. I didn't tell Lena because she would have stopped me. I texted Mark because it felt like a thing you do. You tell someone where you're going when you're about to do something dumb. He didn't reply. I got in my car and drove west. The forest road was the same road, which was somehow the most chilling part for me. The trees didn't lean in or whisper. The sky didn't roil. The same sign stood at the same angles. At the pull-off, there was no man with a thermos. There was only me and the ghost of his warning. I parked and started up the track. It was later in the day than last time, and the light had that metallic edge to it again. I walked faster than I had intended, as if I could beat something to a finish line I didn't understand. At the ridge, I stopped. You could see the bull. You could see the cage in the middle like a black stitch. You could see the cracked concrete and the grass that didn't grow right. The gate was shut. The padlock hung. The marble stone lay inside, white as a tooth. I took a step down the slope. Something rang the iron like a spoon against a glass at a wedding, and the gate swung open. My body did the thing bodies do when some distant young part of your brain takes the wheel. It crouched without consulting me. The iron ring back home pressed cold against my chest where I'd tucked it under my shirt on a cheap leather cord. I don't know why I wore it. I suppose I do. The gate stayed open. The bowl held its breath. When nothing else moved, I got up. One step, two. The grass hissed against my pants. At the edge of the cage, I stopped. The inside smelled like water left too long in a pipe. The padlock hung heavy on the hasp. The marble stone had been wiped clean. No flies, no dust, no message. Into a silence that felt as heavy as a hand, I said out loud, "I'm leaving. I'm sorry." That's when I heard the other thing, not a ring, not a scrape, a breath. A long, easing out breath like someone had been holding it a very long time and had decided to let it go. It came from under the ground. I stepped back without turning because I didn't want to take my eyes off the open gate. The cord around my neck snapped as if something had tugged it, and the iron ring fell out of my shirt into my palm. It was hot. I don't mean warm from skin hot. I mean hot like a key you've left in the sun. It hurt. I almost dropped it, but some old instinct told me not to let go. The air around the cage thickened in a way I can't describe. The way hot air looks above asphalt. The way glass looks when you breathe on it and don't wipe it away. The open gate shivered and stopped. The iron grid on top made that strained sound, and for a second, I swear to you, it bowed. I took another step back. My heel caught on a root. I went down hard on my tailbone and saw stars. From that stupid angle on the ground, the sky above the cage looked very far away. A cloud the size of a thumb peeled off a bigger cloud and drifted like a slow animal. The iron grid creaked again, the sound of a thing holding something back and not sure it could. I scrambled up and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't get poetic. I didn't try to understand. I ran wrong at first because my pack swung, and then I shrugged one strap and I ran right. The track unspooled. The ridge slipped behind. The trees closed in. The road appeared like a life raft. At the car, I fumbled the keys and got in and locked the doors like that meant something. I started the engine. The radio came on by itself even though it had been off. It crackled through static and landed on a station playing a call-in show, the host doing that soothing voice people use with insomniacs. Pui, and we'll go to our next caller, who's been waiting very patiently. Hello. A breath. The same long, easing-out breath I'd heard at the grave. Then the host, unfazed, said, "Go ahead." And what came next was not speech, but the idea of it. A sound shuffled and folded so many times you couldn't get it flat again. I turned the radio off. The sound kept going for a second in the car and then stopped, like it had to run out of tape. I drove away. You'd think the story would end there. That would be a good place to end it. He left and never went back. People love that kind of ending because it lets you put the book down and go make a sandwich. It didn't end there. I got home at dusk. The building was its same old building. The neighbor's kid left her scooter in the hall. The elevator never goes to 3 without stopping at 2 for no reason. My door looked like my door, except it didn't. The latch didn't sit right. The wood had a new bite mark around the striker, like someone had closed it on something that didn't like being in between. The ring I'd held at the grave was still hot. It had left a faint red circle in my palm. I hung it back above the door with a finished nail and a hammer I had to find in the mess of my hall closet because I couldn't seem to put things back where they belonged when my head was like this. I stood on the threshold and thought, this is stupid, and didn't cross. I stood there a long time, then made myself step in like a kid into a pool. The living room was normal. The couch, the TV, the window with the fire escape. You could see the grid of the escape's railing reflected in the glass, and beyond it, the brick wall across the way. I went to the window and looked out, and for a second, I keep saying that, I saw iron bars where the view should be. A neat square grid like the shadow of a cage on a sunny day. Then it was my filthy screen and the off yellow of the wall opposite. I closed the curtains. That helped. It's amazing what cloth can do. It doesn't change what's there. It just lets you not see it. The phone on the counter buzzed. A new voicemail from an unknown number. The transcription feature failed and gave me the usual nonsense. We should no wash watch. I deleted it. I went to the sink and washed my hands because I wanted to do something that had rules and steps. Lena called. I answered because I didn't want her to come over and I didn't want to lie to her. She didn't say hello. She said, "I'm outside your building." "No," I said, more at the room than into the phone. Ben, I just want to look at you," she said. She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh. "Hold your hand up to the window so I know you're okay." "Don't," I said. "Don't come up." "I'm not, things are weird. Please go home." "Hold your hand up," she said, and her voice did that thing the voice on the radio did, folded over itself so many times it had edges. I hung up. I called back. It went to voicemail on the first ring. I texted. It sat on delivered and didn't change to seen. I stood in my living room like a piece of furniture. After a while, I went to the door and put my ear to it. The iron ring above it was cool now. The hall outside was quiet. I opened the door and looked out. The scooter was still lying where it always lies. The smell of cooking drifted up from 2. It was a smell with a timeline. You could tell when the onions went in and when the garlic did. Every normal thing in the world was happening, and also this. Before I went to bed, I took a pen and a scrap of paper and wrote a note to myself, because it felt like a thing a sane person might do. I wrote, "Do not watch." I taped it to my TV. I put my phone in a drawer, powered off. I turned the face of my microwave clock to the wall because it reflects more than it tells time. At 2:19 a.m., the building breathed in. I felt it, not heard it, in my bones. The same way you feel the first drop of an elevator before your head knows. The room cooled and then warmed as if someone had opened the window and closed it again. I kept my eyes shut. If you think this is where I say I saw something and it ruined the rest of my life, I didn't. I didn't see anything because I didn't look. I lay there and thought of the man with the thermos, the way he stood in the road like he'd been posted there by something else to give people a choice. I thought of the words on the stone and the ones on my TV. I thought of Lena and the kid counting under his breath, and Mark in his apartment with the drone footage cued to the wrong frame. Morning came like a long apology. I opened my eyes. The note was still taped to the TV. The curtains were still drawn. The iron ring hung above the door. My phone was still off in the drawer. For 20 minutes, I let myself believe in the cause and effect of my little rules. Then I went to the bathroom and stopped in the doorway. The mirror was fogged like someone had showered. I hadn't. A sentence had been traced into the fog with a fingertip, neat, like a teacher had underlined it with a ruler. You shouldn't have watched. I wiped it away with my palm. Underneath, on the glass itself, faint like a dry fingerprint, the same sentence was there in the outline of tiny squares, as if someone had pressed a small iron grid to the mirror and held it there until the heat made the words, "You shouldn't have watched. I don't have a conclusion to give you." Mark moved to Texas for work and never told me if he took the footage with him. The man with the thermos is probably still out there telling people a thing they won't do. Lena and I didn't make it, but not because of this exactly. Because of all the small ways you can turn away from someone when you're trying not to look at something else. I still have the ring. The nail above my door has a little red rust halo where it sits. Sometimes, late, the building breathes and the ring makes that strange sound, and I put my palm flat to the wood and feel a pressure on the other side like a head leaning there. I don't open the door. If you go looking for the grave, and I know at least one of you will, remember what the stone said, and what I taped to my TV. It's not the storm, or the iron, or the old county article that matters. It's not even the empty coffin people whisper about when the first snow takes the sound out of the pines. It's this. Most doors are opened from the inside, and most of the time the thing you're letting out wears your face well enough that no one stops it at the street. If you hear a gate ring in the woods, if you see iron where it shouldn't be, If a note shows up in your life that knows your handwriting better than you do, don't make it a story first. Don't watch. I'm not the type to post long stories, and I know how this is going to sound. If it helps, you can check the basics. There really is an abandoned Route 66 carve-off east of McLean, Texas, where a concrete pad sits behind what used to be a motel. Locals call it a slab, like it was poured for a patio or a foundation, but there's no building there. Just scrub grass, mesquite, and the hum of the highway off in the distance. A couple years back, a road crew cutting across the property found bones underneath. The sort of detail that ends up being one paragraph in a county paper. The handcuffs part was rumor when I heard it, then it was fact, then it was rumor again depending on who told it. I don't know about any of that for sure. All I know is what happened to me. My co-worker Jess and my brother, Marco, across 2 nights in late September, when a storm rolled off the Caprock and parked over the panhandle like it had a grudge to settle. We were doing sign work at night because that's when the highway department pays a little extra. I'm not a cop or a ranger or anything, not even a trucker with a CB full of tall tales. I hang reflective numbers, repaint arrows, replace dead streetlights, and argue about per diem. We had 8 miles of old 66 to run. Officially, it's business 40 now, but everyone still calls it 66. The plan was to finish a few exit signs, sleep in Amarillo on the cheap, and push west to a job near Moriarty the next morning. The motel we'd booked turned out to be one of those chain places where the carpet tries hard, but can't hide that people have been living there month to month. When the clerk told us they were overbooked, we could either split a queen bed or try elsewhere. We looked at each other and shook our heads. I told Jess we'd try the little mom-and-pop place we'd passed back at the frontage road. That's closed, she said. Did you see the roof caved in? Not that one, Marco said from the back seat. There was another. The one with the neon cactus. That cactus sign's been there since the 40s, Jess said. I don't think it lights up anymore. We drove anyway. The sky did that thing it does out there, where it turns hard pink at the horizon and then gives up to black like a stage light going down. Heat lightning popped to the south, too far to hear, and the smell of rain was a rumor on the wind. We passed a diner with a closed sign that looked permanent, and a wrecking yard with truck cabs stacked like Lego. Bits of the old road appear and vanish out there. Stub streets that go nowhere. Sidewalks leading to weeds. That's what the dead motel looked like when we finally found it. Like a memory you weren't sure you had. A peeling U of rooms around a moon-white parking lot. Half of the roof fallen in. The office a little glass cube jutting at the highway with its blinds crooked. The cactus sign was still there. 3 tubes of neon cracked like veins. It wasn't lit. Even from the road you could see the slab behind it. You've seen 1,000 of them in 1,000 backyard patios. Broom-finished, expansion joints cut clean. The surface buckled here and there where roots have pushed. Only this one had no house, no grill, no anchor points for shade sails or picnic tables. It just sat in a dirt patch like an island. Somebody had stenciled no parking in black spray paint on the edge nearest the motel, and someone else had half-heartedly tagged over it. The office door was chained. The chain was new. We didn't stop there that night. The place you actually could sleep was a mile farther. One of those ground-level motels with rooms you can park in front of. The lady who ran it announced she didn't take cards, only cash, and Marco, who never has any cash, looked at his shoes like a teenager after curfew. Jess covered it and said she'd file it as miscellaneous and told me to shut up about per diem. The room she got us smelled like old cigarettes and pine sol in a ratio that suggested both had been applied recently. We split. Jess kept the room with the double because she'd paid and because she was the one who actually liked sleeping in air conditioning cold enough to hang meat. Marco and I took the other with a single and a couch. You could hear the wind from the highway even with the AC on. It's like the air itself is big there, pushing against everything. Marco flopped on the couch with his boots on, eyes closed, headphones already in. He's 22 and thinks he's bulletproof. I told him to take the boots off and he faked sleep. I took a shower where the water pressure was either a trickle or a fire hose, and then lay with the TV going through 10 channels of reruns. Somewhere after midnight, I clicked the TV off and the room felt like it belonged to someone else who'd just stepped out. A minute later, the phone rang. Not my cell, the motel phone on the nightstand. That square gray plastic that exists only in places where you get a towel folded into a swan sometimes. I looked at Marco. He was genuinely asleep now, mouth open, one earbud still in. I picked up. Yeah? There was a pause. Not dead air. More like someone listening to my side, the kind of pause that comes with another room's ambience leaking through. Then a man's voice, soft. Could have been 30 or 60. Could have been a recording if it weren't for the way it caught on the S. Need a room. I started to say we already had one. And then I realized how dumb that sounded, so I said, wrong room, man, and hung up. I lay there expectant, waiting for the second ring that always comes in horror movies. It didn't come. The air compressor kicked in with a rattling cough and the curtain moved a little in its draft. I told myself some drunk was dialing numbers at random, or the clerk had miskied a wake-up request. I told myself I'd laugh about it with Jess in the morning. I fell asleep without remembering to set an alarm. We overslept. The sky went from bruised to bright in what felt like 10 minutes. And by the time we were loading the truck with a bucket of reflective letters and a chipped ladder, the heat had climbed from, this is nice, to why does my shirt stick to me? We did the work because that's what you do, measure. Drill, bolt, swear, remeasure, swear again. The old signposts had been sandblasted smooth by 30 years of wind, and the holes didn't line up like the spec assumed they would. A guy in a Silverado slowed down, rolled his window and hollered that the new exit number made no sense. I told him I didn't make the numbers. I just welded them to the bad news. He laughed like he hadn't heard his own joke 100 times. It was a normal day with normal annoyances. Around noon, we broke for water and bad sandwiches from a convenience store called Gene's Market, which was actually a shack with a counter and a soda cooler. Gene himself was a man who looked born to lean. He warned us about the storm coming like he was proud of it. It'll come straight up the old road, he said, tapping the counter as if that were a map. South to north and then it'll sit. Lightning's mean when it sits. Jess asked about the slab because she's the type who asks the thing other people leave alone. What's with the cement pad behind the cactus place, she said. Looks like it wanted to be a deck when it grew up. Gene didn't smile. Oh, that's the motel grave, he said. Nobody calls it that in the paper, but that's what it is. Cops say they found some, I don't know what you call it, leftovers. Remains, Jess said. Bones, Gene corrected. My cousin's the one who ran the auger that dug 'em up. They used to stop there. Truckers. Ever since the interstate took the traffic, the old road kept the weird. You work nights? When we nodded, he said, well, if you hear somebody offer you a room, you say no. We laughed because of course you laugh when a stranger tells you to watch out for sentences. Marco said, what if I actually need a room? And Gene said, then get it at the place. You're already staying and not from some voice. Behind a building that shouldn't have a voice, we worked. Through the afternoon until the sky did something I still don't have good words for. You know that color just before a storm snaps? It's like somebody turned down the saturation globally and turned up the contrast locally. It gets calm and the bugs go quiet. That happened around 5. By 6, the far horizon was a wall. You could see rain like a jet of oil pouring out of it. Lightning stitched a bright seam along the bottom edge and then opened it like a zipper, so you could see darker rain behind the first layer, and the wind didn't blow. That was the part I remember the most. It didn't move. It's like the air got stuck between decisions. Jess said, we should call it, and I said, let's hit the last sign by the frontage road so we don't have to come back tomorrow. That last sign was right by the turnoff for the dead motel. We hauled the ladder, lined the letters, checked the bubble level. First fat drops landed and made big dark polka dots on the dust. The thunder took its time getting to us. That meant the storm was still east, except somehow the rain was already here. I was on the ladder, Jess bracing it, Marco in the truck rummaging for a new bit when the hum rolled through. It came from the slab direction, low, not engine loud, more like a transformer. It rose and fell once, and then a glow bloomed behind the motel where the slab was, like old neon laboring to wake up. Jess and I both turned at the same time. The cactus sign, the dead one we'd joked about being from the 40s, lit up on the outline in a pale wheat green. The word vacancy under it sputtered and then steadied in a red that somehow looked redder because the sky was so drained of color. The chain on the office door rattled and settled. I felt the hair on my forearms prickle, and it wasn't static from the ladder. That a generator? Jess asked. Too practical to start in on ghosts first thing. Who would be paying to power that sign? For what? Maybe the storm's waking something, I said without meaning it to sound like a story. Marco leaned out the truck window and said, oh, that's sick. Like he was watching a YouTube glitch video. We stood there watching a sign announce rooms in a building that was ready to fall in on itself. No cars were in the lot. No one moved behind the glass of the office. The rain made the asphalt look brand new except for the weeds pushing through the cracks. The old faded arrows that used to tell you where to park suddenly had definition with the wet. It felt like when you see a bird that looks like a dinosaur for a second and you realize how thin everything is. And then my phone buzzed and showed an unknown local number. I glanced at Jess and she wouldn't have told me what to do if I were on fire. Because we'd already walked past something invisible we couldn't walk back from. I swiped. Before I could say hello, the same voice from last night was there. Same soft S, same no-age sound. If I could describe it better, I would. It was like speaking with your back to a mirror and trying not to look. Need a room, it said. No, I said. The word felt like breaking a rule. No, we're fine. Storm coming, the voice said, like a parent telling me to bring a jacket. Storm sits. You'll want a room. We stood in the road like idiots with rain pooling in our shoes. The ladder abandoned, the old sign hissing its fake availability. I did the stupid thing and said, "Where are you calling from?" And the voice said, "The office." So simply, like obviously from the office of the motel behind me, that clearly had no power except it did because the sign was lit. Jess took my phone out of my hand and hung up. She hit the side button so hard she probably thought it would break. "Okay," she said, "we're done." Her face looked like a map with the legend removed. She was all outlines and no names. We loaded the gear fast. The rain wasn't heavy yet, just the kind that insists. When we pulled past the driveway that led to the dead motel, the vacancy sign flickered off and on again. The office blinds twitched like a hand touching them from behind. It could have been wind. It could have been anything. But that hum rolled again and set the fillings in my back teeth buzzing, and I looked out at the slab and saw a man standing on it. He was backlit by the cactus sign, so at first, all I got was edges. Tall, a bit stooped at the shoulders. A dark jacket that fell wrong, like it was heavier on one side or maybe waterlogged. Had brim dripping. No, I don't think his mouth was sewn shut or any of the dramatic details people are going to add when they tell this wrong. He was just there. The way a person is there in a hallway when you know the hallway should be empty. He turned his head like people do when they're listening past a noisy room, toward the truck, toward the highway, and then he stepped off the slab into the scrub and wasn't there anymore. "Go," Jess said. I went. We ate at the only place open, a barbecue counter in a gas station where the ribs looked better than they were, and we tried to talk about anything else. Marco said the guy on the slab could have walked behind a tree, except there aren't trees really. Not tall enough to hide a person. He said maybe there's a drainage cut. Except when it rains hard, everything out there shows you what it truly is, and I hadn't seen any ditch. Jess didn't say anything until we got to the part about sleep. The thunder had finally arrived and made itself at home, thumping regularly enough to become part of the room. The power cut once, came back, cut again. The motel's hallway emergency lights flickered and steadied. "If the phone rings," Jess said, "don't answer it." There was a beat. "Any phone?" "It rang already," I said before my mouth could check with my brain. "Last night," she swore softly into her pillow. "Tell me in the morning," she said and rolled away. I don't know how late it was when I woke up to footsteps outside our door. Not boot heels on cement. Soft rubber soles scuffing. Motel steps have their own vocabulary, especially the old places where the doors open straight to the lot. The footsteps were slow. A knock came soft, 2 knuckles. Not the open-up housekeeping knock. The "are you awake" knock. I froze and hated myself for it. There are stupid jokes about fight or flight, and there's a third option, and it's stupid too. Freeze and listen. The knock moved 1 door down. Another soft tap. Then 1 more down. Whoever it was working the length of the building. Marco was on the couch again, using a rolled hoodie as a pillow this time, and he shifted in his sleep. The footsteps paused. From the other side of the door, a voice said, not loudly, not whispering, not trying to be scary and in that way being worse. "Need a room?" I didn't breathe. It said it again right at the seam of the door, closer than you can imagine someone whose mouth isn't pressed against the crack. The AC kicked off and the room got quiet in a way that amplified small noises, and I could hear the sound of rain off the walkway metal canopy, trickling down warped gutters. Then, because the universe loves timing, the landline phone on the nightstand rang. Ring. Pause. Ring. I stared at it like I could break it by concentration. I counted to 5. It rang again. Marco jerked awake, fumbled for his cell, then realized it wasn't that. He made eye contact with me like we were kids and Dad was coming down the hall, and in my head I counted the seconds to see if it would ring a fourth time. And it did. My hand moved like it had its own orders and picked up the receiver. I didn't speak. Whoever was out there didn't speak either. Not at first. The rain did. The thunder muttered like a neighbor complaining. Then the voice said, right into my ear and through the doorskin at once, "Storm sits. You'll want a room," I said no. It came out like I'd swallowed gravel. Silence, and then, very white noise, quiet. "You already have a room." Something clicked. Not in the phone, but in the office across the highway in my head. Of course we did. We had a room and somebody wanted a different kind of yes. I noticed then that I could hear another noise under the rain. Not the hum we'd heard before. This was softer. A chuff. If you've ever been in a building with an old ice machine, it's that noise when a fresh batch falls and the tray resets. It came at a rhythm too slow to be mechanical. Chuff, pause. Chuff, like breath filtered through something too narrow. "Who are you?" I said, which is such a TV question. The voice didn't answer so much as speak again, like it hadn't paused at all. "Step around back," it said. "I'll show you." The footsteps moved down the walkway. I heard the mass of a person retreating toward the far end. If I'd opened the door, I know I would have stepped into that awful thin light you get when the parking lot lamps are sodium and the storm is sitting and you can't tell the time of night by the sky. I did not open the door. It sounds very brave typed out like that. It was not. It was like holding still when you see a spider on your steering wheel and praying it forgets you are a person. Eventually the footsteps reached the far door, knocked once, a courtesy, and then faded. The phone went dead in my hand with a clean click like an old switch being thrown. Marco said, too loud, "Dude," and then quieter, "Dude," like a smaller echo of himself. We lay awake until it was gray enough to pull the blind and see that the lot had no new footprints. The thin dust on the walkway held only our own tread from earlier. The storm had washed light lines of dirt down the slope and left little deltas under each downspout. If someone had stood that close to the door the way the voice had sounded, there would be scuff marks. There weren't. Jess banged on our door and we both jumped. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "We're leaving," she said. "Right now. The road's going to flood if we wait." "Where are we going?" Marco asked. "West," she said. "Anywhere else, we loaded like thieves." The lady at the desk accepted cash for a second night we hadn't stayed. Like she'd known when we checked in that we weren't going to be able to make the argument that we should get a refund for being haunted. The highway had that rain gloss that makes everything look like it's about to slip. I kept glancing at the rear view, expecting to see something stepping out from behind a road sign. We did okay until the light by Jean's Market. Water had pooled in the low part of the frontage road and stalled a tractor that tried to ford it. Traffic built. We idled with the wipers beating metronome. The radio faded in and out as if the storm had sat down on the antenna. A semi's trailer lights blinked hazard red. Jean himself came out with a broom for a reason known only to him and pushed water down his front stoop like that would help. He saw our truck and made a face like, "Don't be stupid." We nodded like we wanted to be smart. Stuck at that light, I looked toward the motel grave. The slab looked darker than the dirt around it, like a fresh pour even though I knew it was old. The cactus sign was off. The office door was a rectangle of black behind glass. And yet, if I squinted against the rain, I could make out a thing that made no sense. Outlines underwater almost, like a darker black within the black of the office. A movement. A shape that could have been a person passing behind the counter. Head ducked the way you do when you look for keys below a desk. And then a smaller movement, lower to the ground. Like someone crouching beside someone else. The light turned. We crawled forward and then we were past. And if I had been alone, I might have turned back to prove something to myself. But I had two people who would call me an idiot forever. And more importantly, I felt that if I went back the second time, I might not get to be the one who wrote this. I might get to be the detail locals disagree about. So we went west. You can feel it when you've outrun something you can't see. The air relaxes in pieces. Your shoulders remember how to sit on your body. By the time we hit the New Mexico line, the storm was behind us and the horizon was doing its clean, distant trick. We pulled off for gas and Jess went inside to pay. Marco fell asleep in the seat next to me. I did the thing I shouldn't have done and checked my voicemails. There were 3 new ones from an unknown local number, all while we'd been driving through rain. The first was nothing but road noise and an occasional breath like a microphone had been placed on a chest. The second had a scrape in it like someone setting a heavy thing on a surface and then dragging it an inch. The third was empty for a full 40 seconds, and then, just as I was going to hit delete, the voice said, "Room's ready," in a tone that belonged to any motel anywhere. And then, more like itself, like the storm, like the slab, "You'll come back." I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe to prove something. Maybe to give myself evidence to show someone, in case I ever doubted my own memory. I opened my photo app. The last thing I'd taken a picture of was a stupid meme on the back of a cereal box at Jean's. After that, 5 photos I had never taken of a guest ledger. You know the ledgers they keep at old motels. Names, plate numbers, room assignments, price, initials from the clerk. The first photo was a clean page dated in a handwriting that belonged to another decade. Block numbers, a flourish on the 7. The second was a close-up of one line, a name that wasn't mine. The third scrolled down the page, half of it filled. The fourth was zoomed in too far to be useful, just the fiber of paper and a blue pen line that had bled a little in old paper. The fifth showed the bottom of the page and the next line. Room 7. The price column said 18. That could have been a joke if not for the name written there in my own sloppy capitals. The way I sign for deliveries when the tablet's lagging. I cussed, which didn't help. Jess came back, saw my face, saw the phone, and her mouth tightened. She didn't ask to see. She said, "We're going to Moriarty. We're doing the job. We're turning around in daylight. We're hitting I-40 hard. And we're not stopping in Texas." Marco snored like a chainsaw, and I fought very hard not to be mad at him for being 22 enough to sleep through. Fear Moriarty was wind and chilly in a motel where the ice machine sounded like a smoker coughing. We did the job. It was fine. The second night I slept with the TV volume on 2 so the room had a voice to answer any other voices. The phone didn't ring. The storm didn't sit. I thought maybe that was that. Then I got home to my apartment in Albuquerque, a place with a door that sticks when the weather changes, and on my kitchen counter was a matchbook I hadn't seen before. You forget how quickly a person can talk themselves out of having seen something truly weird. I told myself Jess had left it. I told myself Marco had a sense of humor and a death wish. The matchbook was white once, now yellowed, with the green cactus on it and the motel's name in a font that belongs on postcards under a black and white picture. When I opened it, half the matches were gone. Someone had written a phone number on the inside cover in the same blue blood ink my name had been written in, and underneath it the words, "Check in after dark only." I threw it away. That's why you can't ask me for a photo. I put it in the bag with coffee grounds and an onion end and walked it to the dumpster, and when the lid banged down, the sound was like finality. 5 minutes later, my downstairs neighbor was talking to her sister in that stairwell voice that floats whether you want it to or not, and she said, "Hey, did you know there's an old motel on Cole with a cactus sign?" And I went back outside and pulled the bag out like an animal, and the matchbook was gone. I didn't tell anyone at work. I did what you do. You show up. You load the ladders. You chase the snake of a tape measure in the wind and swear when it cuts your finger. Jess took her vacation days. Marco took a new job with a roofing company that promised him he'd get his own crew in a year. I told myself that was an ending. Then 1 week later, I stopped at a thrift store for a lamp and came out with a shoebox some veteran had used to store patches. In the bottom under an old 82nd Airborne shoulder thing, there was a room key. I didn't want to touch it. It had the teardrop fob you've seen 100 times. Stamped aluminum with a room number on it and the motel name. The number was 7. The corner was worn smooth where chains and pockets had loved it to the present. A strange panic came over me then, the kind that makes you feel like if you put the thing down you'll look away for a second and it'll be in your hand again. So I walked to the counter, paid for the shoebox and the lamp and went home. I put the key in the back of a drawer. That night around 1, the wind came up and rattled the swamp cooler on the roof, and the phone on my nightstand. The little square gray motel phone that doesn't exist in apartments but existed on my nightstand anyway, rang. I didn't answer. I didn't touch it. I listened to it ring and I counted, and I let it go to whatever passes for voicemail when you're asleep and your life is a straight line and then suddenly a circuit. In the morning, the phone was gone. My phone had one new voicemail. It is still on there even though I don't listen to it anymore. It's short. It's the sound of air being moved like a breath across a glass bottle and then a soft voice. No age, no hurry, saying, "Storm's gone. Room's ready. You'll be back along one night." Sometimes driving west after dark, I will pass an old frontage road and a little turnoff where you can almost see the traces of a parking lot. Sometimes I take the next exit and I circle back a mile, two, until the line between smart and brave stretches thin. If I'm with someone, I stay on the main road, because that part of me that's responsible speaks louder then. If I'm alone and the radio is playing a song I loved in high school, and the sky is that big Texas black where there's more space than stars, I slow. I look for a cactus silhouette, a hum, the simplest thing in the world, like a match scraping in the dark. People in town will still tell you that sometimes a sign lights where there shouldn't be power, that headlights flicker out past the slab without a car to make them, that a voice that could be 30 or 60 asks the question we've all answered 1,000 times at counters across America. Sometimes you say yes and it's a soft bed and a cable box that works and the AC rattling like a familiar tune. And sometimes, this is what I think now, it's a ledger page that writes over you, a concrete poured where you were, a room you don't check out of with a key. Because after all that happened, after I wrote this down and made you a witness, after I threw the matchbook away and lost the key and changed my number and chose wider roads, I heard something again last week. I was in my apartment, a storm building up over the Sandias, not Texas at all. The air got stuck between decisions and the power flicked and came back. The TV went to its blue screen and then to static, which TVs don't even do anymore. And in the static was that old chuffing sound, the ice machine catching its breath. I went to the window. On the street, across from the neighbor's Toyota with the missing hubcap, a rectangle of light lay on the asphalt like a door had opened and was waiting. It wasn't a car headlight. It wasn't an apartment light. It was the kind of light with neon in it humming. It went out. The room got small. And at my ear. Not on the phone, not through the wall, not through the vents, but in that very private space you keep for your own thoughts, came a voice without age. It didn't ask yet. It just said something in the tone of a clerk who knows you better than you know yourself because you've been there before. Storm sits, it said, like observation more than warning. You'll want a room. I don't know which night I'll take the turnoff. I'm not brave. I'm not stupid. I am, like most of us, a person with routines and little pieces of paper, where my name is written roughly and checks get cashed. Sometimes when I drive past the old road, I set the cruise to 2 under the speed limit, and the breeze through the cracked windows smells like wet dust and cut alfalfa, a smell like memory being poured. And sometimes in the distance where the slab is, something red flickers, vacancy, like a heartbeat, like a pause lifted, like a hand motioning softly. This way, we've been holding your place. If you ever pass there, and you hear a question asked so gently it registers as your own thoughts, say no. Or say something. Just don't say yes with your feet. That's the trick. Everyone has already said yes enough times in their life. It is easier to say it again when the storm sits and the road feels longer than your courage. If this is the first you've heard of that slab, good. If you've been there, if you've seen the cactus glow and heard the breath behind a wall that can't be there, then you don't need me to prove anything. You already know that some places never stopped being what they were built for. They wait. They learn your name. They light up when you pass. And on a dark highway in Texas where trucks drone like ocean and the grass hisses in the wind, a door will open where there isn't a door, and a voice will offer hospitality that sounds exactly like a kindness. Need a room? It asks from the dark. It says it like it's a favor, and the oldest part of you answers back before you're awake enough to stop it.